Whoa.
All right, welcome everyone. We're going to call the Royal Oak City Commission meeting for February 12th, 2018 to order. We're going to begin with an invocation given by Commissioner LeVasseur, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
As we gather here this evening, we give thanks for the people of our community who, through their kindness to their neighbors and their willingness to share their talents and time, make Royal Oak a better community. We also ask for guidance for the decision makers of our city, that they make decisions that will serve the best interests and lead us as we look to serve our community. Amen.
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 I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Item number 4 on our agenda, presentation of Outstanding Customer Service Awards. Always the best part of commission meetings.
We have Melissa Smith and Craig Dragna. Every quarter, the city awards 2 outstanding customer service awards to employees who provide exceptional service that demonstrates the Royal Oak values and codes of conduct. This time around, we had 5 nominations from both the public and co-workers, and the winners were selected by the customer-centric cultural team. Melissa Smith is a member of the Royal Oak Public Library. She went above and beyond by giving top-notch customer service. According to her nomination, this is a quote, "I was in the library this week looking for the book Wonder for Z in her book club. It was supposed to be in the library, but I couldn't find it. Melissa in the youth area worked with me. She was the most pleasant and helpful person. Helped me out while checking young kids in for the reading program. She checked your library, other libraries, and finally called Ferndale for me to have the book held. I was very impressed with her and her level of service." The customer-centric culture team was impressed by Melissa taking the extra step for library patrons. Thank you for your service, Melissa. Craig Dragna is a member of the Information Technology Department. Went out of his way to provide both internal and external customer service. According to his nomination, Craig works hard even when faced with many problems. And I quote, "Craig's always very responsive when needed. He's returned calls for help while not even at work. If he can't figure out the problem, he calls for help until it's resolved, or he can tell me when it will be resolved. He always has a great attitude, and even when faced with angry and upset customers, he deserves to be recognized for all his hard work." The team was very impressed by Craig going above and beyond for the Royal Oak team with a positive attitude. Thank you for your service, Craig. Thank you. One more thing. We have scooters. The scooter goes to the department that the winners come from. And last time around, the police department monopolized them and had both of them for the quarter. This time they're going off in 2 different directions. The scooter really comes out of something that started at Pixar. This whole program started when we did the Disney Way training, and the consultant that put that together was very impressed with the way Pixar had handled customer service, and they actually used the scooters for real, although I think they had something a little bit sturdier than these Razor type scooters, that they actually used it for transportation in their offices. That is actually not so far out of line because we have a company downtown that uses a scooter, although they use a self-balancing two-wheel scooter to zoom around vector form just above where the bookstore used to be. But anyway, the departments get the scooter, the employee gets the plaque, and I think you both chose the signs, correct?
Yeah.
The street sign with their name on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. You know, I'm always so proud to see our city staff and hear about the stories of how hard they work on a daily basis. We have hundreds of people that work for our city that, for the most part, they do their job every day. They do it very well. And, you know, in government, if you do that, pretty much that's a ticket to going unnoticed. And I can tell you, you know, since we put in this program, you know, we always see a number of employees going above and beyond the call of duty, totally unnecessary to do so, but they do it because they really have a genuine care for other people. It's why they got into the business of being in government and helping others out. And, you know, Craig and Melissa are just another shining example of, you know, our city's employees' commitment to service. So let's give them one more round of applause. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item number 4, public comment. Sometimes a highlight of our meetings. Sometimes, most of the time. Good YouTube clips out there. The City Commission values and relies on the input of our citizens to make decisions. Public comment is the time set aside for the public to address the City Commission on any related issues, whether they're on the agenda or not. There's also a public hearing scheduled tonight, so if you're here to address the City Commission on that public hearing, I ask that you wait to have and present your comments until we open up that public hearing. That's the best time to do it. For both public comment and the hearing, if you wish to speak, please wait until you're recognized by me, the mayor. Then come up to the podium. We ask for the record that you state your name and address. And please be mindful that we do want to hear from everyone who wishes to speak tonight, so we do limit the comments to 5 minutes. We have a wonderful, state-of-the-art, highly technical timer at the podium to help you keep track of time. I ask that when you direct comments to the commission, you do it as a whole and not to individual commissioners. We're a team here, so we appreciate that. If you don't wish to speak tonight, never hesitate. Write us emails. You know, give us phone calls. Talk to us on the street. We're always listening. I know when sometimes there's snow emergencies and we get 600 emails, it's difficult to respond to all of them, but we do read, or at least I try to read most of them. Please note that the City Commission, we won't respond directly to questions during public comment, but we are taking notes, and we will address those questions when the agenda topic comes up. And if it's not germane to what's taking place on the agenda tonight, we'll refer it to the proper city department. And our city manager does take notes here. And he does follow up on matters as needed. So with that, now that we've laid down the ground rules of public comment once again, who's first?
Does it matter?
No, I'll call on you. Yes, ma'am. It's not the last bidder in this case, it's the first bidder.
Good evening. My name is Heather Lewis, and I live at 2313 Clawson Avenue here in Royal Oak. I'm a member of the Royal Oak Crime Prevention Council, and I'm here to personally extend an invitation to all of you, as well as the citizens of Royal Oak and the citizens of Berkeley, to an event that we are putting on in March. It's going to be March 20th at 6 p.m., and the event is called Courthouse 101. You can get some more information from the website. The city website should have our flyer. But basically, Judges Meineke and Wittenberg, along with their capable staff at the courthouse, have been gracious enough to work with us to welcome the community into the courthouse to learn what your courthouse can do for you. It can be a lot of times, well, through our lives, most of us will have some contact with the courthouse, whether it's jury duty or paying a ticket or something worse. And that time can be intimidating and upsetting. But we're hoping to take away the mystery, take away the intimidation, and make it welcoming, because as I said, it is everyone's courthouse. We hope to have a variety of stations where we will rotate through the evening to learn about jury duty, and online case search, sobriety court, teen court, moving around to know everything that the court does for the community and all that it has to offer. So I think that's everything I have to say, but I hope to see a lot of the faces here that night. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis, and thank you for your time serving the Crime Prevention Council.
Thank you.
Okay. Who's next? Mr. Farhat.
Good evening. John Farhat, 1930 Larome Drive. I'm here tonight to speak on an ordinance that is regarding temporary residential construction fences. Some of you on the commission may remember that I was here this past July when this topic came up, and I was actually an advocate for making stricter guidelines to builders like myself in the community, as well as some adjustments to right-of-way requirements. I'd like to read an ordinance that I'm here to talk about tonight, and it's regarding temporary fencing. So as the ordinance currently reads, prior to the commencement of construction or demolition, the construction site shall be enclosed with a stable chain link fence not less than 4 feet in height. Any gate shall open inward so as not to obstruct the public right-of-way. When there is not active construction on site, the gate shall be secured. The last sentence is what I want you to pay attention to closely. It says, within 10 days of the issuance of a conditional certificate of occupancy, the fence shall be removed. I'm currently building a house at 1206 Greenleaf Avenue in Royal Oak. Just this past week, I took a temporary construction fence down. The project in its current state is that the house is completely framed, sided, roof is on, windows are installed, all exterior doors are installed with locks. The site is final graded. The sidewalk is finished according to the engineering department standards. The right-of-way is sodded, and there are no material or machinery in the yard. The only thing left on site is a porta-john and a dumpster, which need to stay until the end of the project. The house is 100% secured. There's no way for anyone to gain access to the property. This past weekend, I got a letter in the mail and received a $250 fine from the city of Royal Oak for not having a temporary construction site, a construction fence on site. So I called a meeting with Jason Craig, who's the head of the building department, this morning to just discuss the issue. And I want to read his interpretation of the ordinance. So once again, I'm going to read it, this last line, which is the key here. So within 10 days of the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, the fencing shall be removed. The way that I interpret that is that once I receive my certificate of occupancy, I have 10 days to make sure that that fence comes down. I believe that that's the interpretation so that builders don't keep these fences up longer than they need to. So when I met with Mr. Craig this morning, and I was really confused why I received this fine, he told me that the way that the building department is interpreting this ordinance is different. So the way that he is interpreting it is that I'm allowed to take my temporary fence down once I get within 10 days of receiving my certificate of occupancy. So I'm thinking I need to take it down within 10 days of getting it. He's reading it that I have to leave it in place until I'm within 10 days of receiving it. Anyone that's familiar with the construction business will know that's a very difficult task to achieve because there's no way to know when you are going to receive your certificate of occupancy when I call my final inspections, and there's a lot of gray area in that interpretation. So my understanding was that the ordinance was put in place to begin with to protect the safety of our community, curious kids, curious neighbors want to peek in windows, and keep people out of dangerous working conditions, as well as to contain workers, debris, material, garbage inside of the lot to not spill over into neighboring homes. So the slight flaw that I believe exists in this ordinance is that it's impossible to landscape a house without flat work being done, driveways, sidewalks, walkways. Well, it's impossible to do flat work until the site is final graded. It's impossible to finally grade a site with a fence in the way. So I'm asking that the commission relooks at this amendment in its current, in the way that the current ordinance is written. I'm sorry, I'm going to back up for 1 second here. So after I met with Mr. Craig this morning, it was determined that not only do I have to pay a $250 fine for removing the fence, but that I have 9 days to reinstall a new temporary fence. So if anyone knows what the weather looks like outside, 2 feet of snow and ice on the ground would be very difficult to convince a company to come in and reinstall a chain link fence within the next 9 days. Now, I understand that Mr. Craig is enforcing the ordinance as he reads it. I'm not faulting him for doing his job, but I do think that there is a good amount of gray area in this ordinance. May I ask for a 1 minute extension here? Maybe really quick.
All right, I'll give you 10 seconds.
10 seconds, okay. So all I'm asking is that the commission re-looks at this amendment or this ordinance to make an amendment that is clear, that makes sense for not only the building community, the neighbors, and the builders that are working in Royal Oak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farhat. Is that Mr. Colo I see?
Hello, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. Brandon Colo, 600 East Hudson Avenue. So before I start tonight, I just want to speak as a really proud library board member. I think this is 3 of the 5 last quarters that we have won the Outstanding Service Award. We have something really good going on at the library, and congratulations again to Melissa for helping us bring that home. So with that being said, I'm here tonight to speak on the last item on your agenda, the discussion on the proposed task force for aging in place. I think this task force is long overdue. Several years ago, we disbanded the senior committee that had been established in the 70s and folded it into the Parks and Rec Committee. Now, while the Parks and Rec Committee is great, they have over 50 parks to make sure are operating to their highest capability. Our seniors deserve a committee that's focused solely on improving their quality of life. Any task force developed needs to look at 3 main areas: housing, transportation, and senior services. As our community grows and new housing developments arise, we need a committee to make sure that these housings provide for affordable and accessible options. I'm 30 and I'm sick of walking upstairs. I can only imagine what it's going to be like 40 years from now. So we need to make sure we have a housing stock that's going to grow with our community. Our on-demand senior transit option is anything but that. You have to call days in advance to arrange for a trip and can only take a ride weekdays until 3:30 p.m. That's a joke. We need a committee dedicated to expanding these options and finding better ways to make the service truly on demand. And finally, our seniors deserve an oversight board. Our library is great because we have a dedicated board with members working hard with a world-class librarian. Let's bring that same oversight to our senior center and services. I truly believe that many minds working together is better than just one. So thank you for bringing this up and having the foresight to know what an important issue this is to our community and helping us grow like this.
Thank you, Mr. Colo. Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, Bill Harrison, 2729 Trafford. I'm disappointed that the majority of the commission has politicized what has always been a nonpartisan entity. I remember when then Mayor Jim Ellison outstretched his arms and proclaimed, let's face it, we're all Democrats. I continue to be concerned about what I call a trickle-down totalitarianism. And if you know what a mess we have in Washington, unless you've been hiding under a rock or listening to CNN, you know what I'm speaking about. The majority imposes its authority on residents to install sidewalks while removing the tree canopy, thus changing the character of the neighborhood. The first action of this current commission was to increase to 3 the number of commissioners required to add an item to the agenda. Didn't go unnoticed that it wasn't more than that, so that if you ever lose the majority, you still are able to bring things to the table, which is as it should be. Preventing a commissioner from asking further questions of the city attorney. The allegation was from the mayor that it violates our rules. Our rules? What rules? The city commission meetings are based on Robert's Rules of Order. Of all of the commission meetings that I have watched or attended, I have never, ever seen a commissioner be prevented from asking questions of the city attorney. I'm also concerned about the runaway spending projections for the extravagant civic center facilities even before construction begins. I'm further concerned about the potential for change orders and cost overruns during construction. You all got one of these photos that shows the little dinghy named original contract and the big cruiser called change order. You're going to have to watch that. I'm also concerned that the DDA will be overburdened by the obligation to supplement the bond payments in the parking fund cannot cover the debt service. This is reminiscent of the I-696 land purchase over 35 years ago that crippled the DDA financially for about 30 years just to pay off the bond debt. I don't know how it is in your household, but in my household, I have always been the last to receive when it comes to spending. The culture in the majority of the commission and the city administration is that the city administration comes first and the residents are secondary. Even the $27,000 that the city receives from the residential water system insurance program is not passed on to the subscribers in the form of lower payments. As the owner, and finally, as the owner of downtown rental property, I'm concerned about the negative impact that the administration, the commission majority, and the consultants have had on my tenants' confidence and unrest. Retail Coach publicly stated that the rents are too high, but when I asked what are the rents, they were unable to reply, and they weren't able to tell me what the rents are in downtown. I was appalled, and that was right at this podium. My rental rates are commensurate with Ferndale, Berkeley, Clawson, which are lower than the average in downtown Royal Oak, because I believe in supporting retail. But all that my tenants know is what they're repeatedly told: rates are too high. When I was on the DDA, I wanted to do a blind study to find out where the rental rates are relative to conventional norms as a percent of gross sales, but the administration pushed back on doing the survey. My tenants are currently concerned about the potential for property tax increases and special assessments that the city manager continues to talk about imposing in order to pay for the parking structures. Such increases are passed on to the tenants per the terms of a typical lease. As I've often said, landlords don't pay taxes. We collect them just like sales tax. So in closing, when are you, the administration, and the commission majority going to start thinking about the unintended consequences of your actions and what you say? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Who's next? Yes, in the back. I see a hand way in the back.
It's Ms. Taylor. I am a business owner, so what he said, I just had to get up in there. My situation is like he said, the rent rates are higher. Everything is growing in Royal Oak. The problem is we're not making money like that to be able to pay those higher things. One thing that I see is signage. I saw that you guys are having that on your agenda. I'm not exactly sure what type of signage that is, but I know the major signage is 10% of the building. Perfectly fine with that. I'm on the back of a building. No one can see me. I can't put a sign in the yard. I can't advertise my business in any type of way besides spending thousands of dollars into advertisement to get someone into my building. That doesn't always work. So I figure if I can put a sign out saying that I'm having to sell every now and again, anything to help businesses, small businesses, into producing customers to pay those taxes, then we wouldn't complain so much. Like, we had a problem with parking downtown, so I moved to another location with parking, but that move was tragic for me. And it's hard, so I need to do some type of signage in order to pull customers to me. They can go right past Royal Oak, go to Clausen, go to here. I see people with signs. I see people with flags, and we're not able to do that. I've been here over 6 years now, and that struggle is hard. So just so you guys know, like, please do something for us small businesses, as well as those taxes that he was speaking of, because we still have to pay for it. We pay for school taxes, we pay for property taxes, we pay all kind of taxes, but what are we getting in return? Like, we need those customers in order to produce money and what's the word I'm thinking of? A profit in order to pay those high rates that, we have. So please keep me up to date. Someone tell me something. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Ma'am? Ms. Taylor? Could you please leave contact information with the clerk?
Absolutely.
All right, who's next?
Closing, by the way.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name's Jan Bills. I'm at 624 Detroit Avenue, and I just wanted to update everybody on the workshop this past weekend. It was our free, family-friendly community workshop to how to prevent and control rats in our city. And I just want to say it was such a huge success in spite of the weather. We estimate that we had over 500 people come through and get the information that they need. So the premise of our whole workshop this weekend was no poisons, please. You can see I have my button on. Many people got buttons as well, but it was such a big success. We've had so many emails and messages from people wanting, are we going to have follow-ups? So it isn't our plan to maybe have not the big one that we had, but just to have some hour lectures where we can keep educating the community. Even we had people from Madison Heights, Birmingham, Ferndale, Berkeley, from all over. So it was a really big success. It was well received by everybody. I thank all the commissioners that came. Mr. Johnson came. I thank you. And then special thanks to Judy because she pulled a lot of strings to make sure that that parking lot would be cleared for us. And it was just a good day. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bills. Mr. Wolf has, Mr. Wolf.
Ron Wolf, 333 North Troy Street. Imagine you walk into a retail store and you're asking for some advice, and a store employee suddenly comes over, interrupts you, and monopolizes the conversation. What do you feel like? You're a customer, you know? In fact, you even have a credit card with that store, and you do a lot of business with that store. But you have to wait while some employee, has business, other business. That's how residents are feeling like. They feel like their employer is mistreating them here. And in my observation over the years, it's not just Royal Oak, but I think it's a sad fact of government today in the United States, is that our city our developers, people with deep pockets, come here and look at the city as a cash cow. We give them huge abatements, brownfield abatements, you name them, whatever, we give them, okay? What does the city do in return? It treats its residents like a cash cow. If somebody calls up and says, this guy took down his fence and, you know, they send an inspector over and what's his inspector do? They write a ticket. And then they give some cockamamie reason for it later. You know, there's a lot of incompetence in the world, even up to the federal level. And we need to start recognizing incompetence where it exists, even within our city. There might even be some corruption. I don't know. I have no proof of it. Now, what I'm here today also is if a private business constructs a sign and pays for the city permit to put up the sign, it can deduct all those expenses from its taxes. But what can a church that gives the vast majority of its contributions to charity to the needy do? It's a nonprofit. It can't claim a tax exemption. Yet the city seems to have no heart when it comes to Good Shepherd Lutheran. They paid in good faith $300 up front. They don't know everything about how the city works and how every little T needs to be crossed and every I needs to be dotted. Can't you cut them a break? Can't you cut a resident a break once in a while? For God's sake, you can't even get a break on a $10 parking ticket in this town. They won't give it to you. God forbid you should try to pay it off with a roll of pennies. Oh, you see what you get, see what happens. Come on. Okay, now the other thing is trees. West Bloomfield has designated many oak trees with a brass plaque, protecting them from ever being taken down. I'd like to see a committee go around this spring and find those majestic trees that are doing well and protect them, because we never know what's going to happen down the road. And as far as the amusement park they want to put up in Normandy, it's not, to me, it's more of an amusement park than a splash pad. I'm not against a small splash pad, but I'm against an amusement park because it's going to mess up the whole neighborhood parking and everything in the neighborhood. What you can do is put out and have just like you did with Ron Bogie, have some private businesses come in, give them a piece of land in the city park, you know, give them a huge abatement, let's get 20 years, I could care less. But and let them decide how much money they're going to charge, what the market will bear. And the city will have its splash pad, and it won't have to be saddled with the administration and running of it and paying the water bills. Simple. We have 50-yard parks. There must be some sections of some parks where you can take 3 or 4 acres set aside and put out an RSP for people who want to build the splash pad so many people in this community want. When I thought the splash pad meant something like Hart Plaza, you know, it's a little thing for the kids. That's what I thought the splash pad would be. But I'm hoping that still something like that will be done if the Central Park, downtown Central Park, does what I wish and constructs a really nice fountain that would do this city proud, just like Campus Martius has. Not as big as, but, you know, nice, because today we have all those LED lights and everything else. All right, I know I'm running short, so I'm going to try to finish on time, and I just hope you change your attitude towards the residents, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Who's next? Going once. I think, is that Ms. Hennessy?
Carol Hennessy, 258 East 12 Mile Road. I'm here representing the AOH. Sean Dare's in charge of the St. Patrick's Day Parade, and apparently he couldn't make it tonight. So I gave Melanie some flyers with applications. This is in regards to the Royal Oak St. Patrick's Day Parade. It's Saturday, March 10th at 10 a.m., and it's going to start at Royal Oak Middle School. And it's going to end at 7th Street in the St. Mary's parking lot like it always has. The only thing that's different is the time change. It's going to start at 10 a.m. And everyone's welcome. And we do have a Gmail account that you can go to. It's called St. Pat's, P-A-T-S, Parade, R-O, royaloak@gmail.com, and you can get more information there and an application. And I gave Judy Davis one today to put on the website. So hope you can all come. Thank you.
Ms. Hennessy. Who's next? I see a hand there in the middle. Can't see a face, but I can see a hand.
Good evening, Janice Wagman, 600 Wellesley. Having mentioned in several previous public comments here and at the Parks and Rec about Royal Oak neglecting issues relating to seniors, I was happy to see the City Commission has finally acknowledged the rapidly growing senior population known as the Silver Tsunami and added an agenda item this evening proposing the creation of a task force. According to the Daily Tribune, the intent of the proposed task force is to address aging in place and specifically housing and transportation issues. I urge the Commission and task force to also consider the following. Aging in place may mean exactly that, where they live, not moving out. But maybe they might need modifications to their homes. How many seniors do we know actually want to move out of their houses? I don't. If your solution is to have new construction incentivized for seniors, you will only be serving those who can afford the increasing home prices in Royal Oak and the tax burden of moving from a heavily protected assessment to more than likely a higher tax bill. Fixing the broken financial system, consistently mentioned in your strategic planning goals, will tax many seniors out of their homes. Improved transportation hours, and for most seniors who do not drive, means curb to curb, not a quarter-mile walk like they're talking about with the transit, the ROGO. Instead of looking at parking lots as developmental opportunities, consider convenient parking because it will be even more necessary. But there's more to aging in place than housing, taxes, and transportation. The city needs to reactivate the Senior Citizens Advisory Board, but with mission and goals to proactively look at dealing with senior issues, such as the Royal Manor parking issue we have now. And the agenda item you have tonight with Royal Oak and Bloom, where you're going to move it in there where they have their parking permits. Proactively coordinating senior information and resources from Oakland County Senior Advisory Council, the Area Agency on Aging, the state and federal governments. Improving communication to the residents of Royal Oak about what is available, such as roses, senior outreach, AGE, etc. Seniors, as well as most every other demographic group in Royal Oak, prefer mail, not websites or social media, and that's according to a survey done and endorsed by this commission. For example, according to a citizen satisfaction survey conducted for our city, very few people know about the senior transportation we have now, and that includes those that are 65 and over. And number one, improving the senior center and its services. By taking road trips to other centers who offer gift shops, full fitness equipment facilities, gyms, workshops, woodworking shops, ceramics, stained glass and craft shops, wellness centers, adult daycare centers, all under one roof. And there's a lot of centers around here that have a collection of those, not all of them. Our senior center is woefully lacking. Many also lower the age requirements, some as low as 50, and increase the hours. We need new sources of funding. Grants, encouraging and promoting sponsorships by local businesses, fundraisers, etc. Plant and Moran has adopted OPC, and they donated $9,000 last year. Investigate a merger with surrounding cities such as Rochester has done, where Rochester Hills, and Oakland Township have done when they created the OPC, and more that can't be itemized in 5-minute time allotment. Finally, while the city is focusing on spending at least $70 million on the Civic Center development, splash pads, soccer fields, and new parks, we have $0 budgeted for new senior services and aging in place. So that's about seniors. Regarding agenda item number 14, confirmation of mayoral appointments and specifically the Planning Commission. As I stated in previous public comments, the reappointment of this individual will allow one person to have 15 years of impact on the development of Royal Oak, an excessive amount of time. This term will be even more important because of the rewrite of the master plan and the resulting impact on zoning. Many residents are unhappy with the multifamily, high-density developments approved by this Planning Commission and the Commissioner. I encourage the mayor to reconsider before reappointing someone who will grant variances to high-density projects with insufficient parking, but will deny a variance for an LED sign request to a church who provides so much to so many in our community. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. Who's next? Dr. Anderson?
Good evening, Mayor Fournier and Royal Oak Commissioners. I'm Dr. Wallace Anderson, that's with an IS and an SEN, at 404 Mount Vernon Boulevard. First, I want to thank the 3 commissioners who voted on January 22nd against immediately establishing the tax rolls for the Sidewalk Improvement Program. Although disappointingly the measure was passed, I am most grateful to these 3 commissioners who were unwilling to rubber stamp this tax on individual homeowners for repairing public sidewalks. One of the most troubling aspects of the actual bills is that they often vary widely from the original estimates given to homeowners. One of my neighbors was given an estimate in the $500 to $600 range, for example, but his actual bill was over $1,100. I've not heard of one bill that came in under the original estimate, except for the few people who successfully talked with a city engineer and got the number of flags to be replaced reduced. I was not one of those. I'm glad to see that there's discussion of taking a different approach for future sidewalk improvement programs. But what talk I've read about taking a different approach is only for replacement slabs. The issue of new sidewalks, where none have ever been, is a totally separate issue, and apparently those would be excluded. For new sidewalks, homeowners and seniors such as myself are being quoted bills of $8,500 and more. And Matt Exley actually said to me last summer when he was walking our property that that estimate for us was low. I'd be surprised if our bill doesn't end up being over $10,000. New topic. Second, I really want to express a general concern about Royal Oak taxation. Here's the worry. We're told that Normandy Oaks Park will cost twice what is allocated, presumably $6 million with $3 million allocated, per the contractors Nowak and Frous. The city and or DDA are building a new police station, a new city hall, a new parking deck west of the library, and perhaps other items. And although these projects are to be financed by bond issues, they will be paid by taxpayers without a plebiscite to obtain taxpayer approval, unlike what Lansing did for a very similar project recently. I do understand that part of the city's problem is that state revenue sharing has been significantly reduced. I understand very practically what that means because when I started teaching at Oakland University in 1983, the state funded the universities at about 75% of their annual budget. And when I retired last August, it was below 25%. Well, you know what happened. The school responded, as did all the other second-tier state universities, by increasing tuition. I don't know what the 3 research institutions are doing, but certainly they raised it, but I don't know that they've done it as significantly. But today, most of our students, as you very well know, graduate with really a serious, staggering debt to pay back. My concern is that Royal Oak has launched successful millages already to support the schools, the roads, the police and fire. We passed a library millage a while back and will likely recommit to that if it comes up again. As a result, my taxes have gone up considerably, easily by more than $1,000 a year after the roads and police and fire initiatives were passed. And per the Tribune, property taxes will rise overall as property values are increasing. Knowing that money is finite, I urge the city and the commission to take a more conservative approach to public works, from building parking decks to parks and police stations, so the residents' tax burden is not increased further. Or, since the taxpayers will be paying, why are these proposals not put up for a vote in the next election. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Who's next? Going once, going twice. All right, we're going to bring the meeting back up here, which brings us to item number 6, approval of the agenda. I'm hoping, actually, we've been talking about this for a little bit related to some of the concerns with the interpretation of the construction fence ordinance. So I'm putting my remark out there. If there's anyone up here with the approval of the agenda that would like to make a motion to include that as a discussion item, I would appreciate that. Commissioner Dubuck?
Sure, with the addition of a conversation about the construction fence ordinance, I'll move to approve the agenda.
Is there support? Supported. Mr. Gillum, you can't second the motion.
Can I comment after the motion?
Okay. Commissioner Macy seconded the motion.
Mayor.
Commissioner Dubuck?
Apologies, we have an item from closed that we need to add to the agenda as well.
Okay. Commissioner Dubuck, would you like to restate your motion?
Yes, I'll move to approve the agenda with the addition of a conversation regarding the construction fence ordinance and the item previously discussed in closed session, which was
Hale versus City of Royal Oak. Thank you.
Seconded by Commissioner Macy. Okay. Discussion, Commissioner Dubuck? I'm doing the formalities here, man. Okay. Any other discussion on the agenda as presented? Okay, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes. Okay, that brings us to the consent agenda, which consists of City Commission meeting minutes from January 8th, 20th, 22nd, 2018, claims January 30th, February 1st, 2nd, 13th, and 2018, approval of purchase orders, approval of special event permit for Royal Oak Chamber of Commerce, Royal Oak and Bloom, approval of amendments to the sign ordinance, second reading, contract modification to contract CAP 1715 asphalt resurfacing improvements, Michigan Department of Transportation, certification of South Edison Avenue as a public street, approval of administrative services agreement with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Are there any requests to remove any of these items from the consent agenda? Commissioner LeVasseur.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to have item D, the Royal Oak and Bloom, put out there for discussion, as well as would like to have item F, the road resurfacing contract, put out there for discussion.
Okay. We have a,
I'll second that.
well, do you put it in form of a motion, Commissioner LeVasseur?
That's my motion is to accept the consent agenda with those two items removed.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second by Commissioner Gibbs. Any discussion? Commissioner Macy?
I would just remove things automatically from the consent agenda if someone asked.
Yeah, but we're still going to approve the rest of the items in the consent agenda. Further discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes. That brings us to item letter D, formerly on the consent agenda. Commissioner LeVasseur?
This is with regard to the Royal Oak and Bloom, which is being proposed being moved to a different location than in years past. And this is in anticipation of construction going on in the parking lots that neighbor the City Hall. My concern is the parking that's being used by the seniors across the street at Royal Oak Manor, and making sure that we're taking affirmative steps to try to accommodate them if Royal Oak and Bloom is moved to the parking lots around 6th and 7th Street on Main Street.
Corey, do you want to speak to that since you are up to date on it?
Sure. We had a discussion with the city manager about that topic this morning. We'll be issuing 30 temporary one-day permits to the manor for the individuals that have those permits to park in an alternative lot or in the area right around the manor.
Okay. Do their permits currently limit them to those lots right now?
I believe it does, yes.
Okay.
And also, I believe Sunday parking is free, so those.
Parking is free, but they can't be in that lot. Any vehicles in that lot will have to be removed.
Yeah, I'm assuming that they'll need to relocate. Most of those folks, they're not going to get up at 3 in the morning to move their car.
We're going to give them, I think, from Saturday from 5 p.m. till late in the evening on Sundays.
Okay.
Commissioner Prush.
I am assuming this is similar to what we do for Arts, Beats, and Eats when it's occupying
Yes.
that same parking lot, so
Well,
they're familiar with.
Actually, it's a little broader than we do for Arts, Beats, and Eats. Arts, Beats, and Eats, remember, during that time period, we've got residential permit parking
Okay,
in force. So we give them permits, the same parking permits that we give to the residents to allow them park on residential streets.
okay.
But during that time, there are no alternative city parking facilities that are available. So they're only allowed to park on residential streets during Arts, Beats, and Eats with a permit.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions for city manager or for Chief O'Donoghue? Okay.
Yeah, I'd
Commissioner
like to move approval of the Royal Oak and Bloom arrangements.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Douglas. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Dubuck. Any discussion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. That brings us to item number F of the former consent agenda, contract modification to contract CAP 1715 asphalt resurfacing improvements. Commissioner LeVasseur.
Thank you. Mr. Callahan, I see, is here, and he and I traded a couple emails on this topic. My understanding is that, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing or don't have the full name of the contractor, Ajax,
Ajax Paving.
right? And we've worked with them for a couple of years?
Yeah, if we approve this contract mod, this will be the 4th year that they've been working on this particular type of project.
Okay, and if I understand correctly, it's about $2.5 million, the proposed modification.
Yes.
That's roughly half of our budget for road enhancements?
Yes, it is.
Okay. If I understand correctly, Ajax originally got the contract through an open bid process?
That is correct.
Okay. If we wanted to submit this to open bids, is there a best time of the year to start that process?
Yes, right around this time, maybe a couple weeks before this, but right around now.
Okay. If I'm understanding correctly, you're recommending to move forward because of some other concerns, time-wise?
Well, primarily, this is with the prices of construction work that we're seeing going on between 3% and 5%. This is only a 1.27% increase in the overall costs. They're keeping all but just a very small number of their costs consistent with last year's prices. They were the low bidder last year. So the very first year of this particular project, they were the low bidder, and over the course of that year, we worked out a lot of kinks, and they got better and better, and their timeframes have been shorter and shorter. We have confidence that they can do this project quickly, and they have told us they want to expedite this project and get it done in a much faster time frame than we're used to. So we can save more money by having less staff involved with the project because it goes faster. So there's other savings at the construction side of it that are a little bit harder to put down on paper, just because, you know, we know that their prices are what their prices are, and it's a significant savings over what we think will happen if we go out to bid.
Have we put out contracts or sought bids on the other half of the budget for 2018?
You'll be seeing them at the next commission meeting, so those project awards for the concrete portion, for the joint sealing, for the other things will be coming up shortly.
That's the other roughly $2.5 million.
Yes.
Right. And I'm just concerned, wanting to know whether those are going through the open bid process.
In some instances, there's a lot of reasons why we decide to not make a contract mod to award more work to a contractor we had last year. A lot of times it has to do with the contractor themselves. But, you know, we believe that in this particular case, with this particular contractor and the prices that they're going to hold, we're going to be able to achieve all the work that we want to do under this contract within the budget that we've set up.
Okay, and I know you answered some of my emails earlier, but just for everyone else's benefit, could you give us a feel for the costs associated with seeking bids, as well as the time frame associated with opening it up for open bids?
Well, there's certainly a time lag. There's a 6-week to 8-week process to go out to bid. And this particular contractor wants to start work in early April. If we say go out to bid now, we might get some contractors that want to work across the timeframe that we've set up in this particular contract. Initially, we say from May to November. Ajax wants to do the work as soon as possible in April through July.
Okay.
And be out of the city. So for them to start as soon as they want to, we want to do the contract mod as soon as we can, so they can get all the materials and subcontractors on board that they need to have to start as soon as possible. They have other work later in the summer that they're already committed to, and they need a fairly decent-sized project before that time to fill out their year.
Okay, so approximately 7-8 weeks or so for a bidding process, and the administrative costs and other costs associated with that?
There's administrative costs. A lot of the work to put together this contract has already been done. We've developed the specifications, we've developed the list of items, we've gone out and surveyed all the streets to find out what concrete we want to replace, and the asphalt part of it is the primary main item of work that they're going to do, but there's a lot of concrete work that goes along with it and the ramps, so.
You know, what I'm looking for is the cost of the actual process of seeking out the bids. You know, I believe you mentioned it was a few $1,000s potentially.
At this point, with all that work behind us, it's just a few $1,000s more to go out to bid that would be added to the administrative costs at the front end of this project.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Douglas?
Yeah, I'd like to move approval of the resolution as proposed to modify the Ajax contract.
A motion by Commissioner Douglas. Is there support? Support by Commissioner Perush. Discussion? Commissioner LeVasseur?
I will support the motion, but I do have reservations. I do note that that this contractor was selected through the open bid process initially. Ideally, I would have preferred to see that this work for this year also be submitted to through the open bid process. It's a $2.5 million contract. And so I think that warrants perhaps the additional few $1,000s of administrative costs to see if we can get a better deal. However, the timing of it is probably the concern. So ideally, we would see these proposals come up just a little bit earlier so that we wouldn't be potentially losing a month or two of construction and have to bypass the bid process. But, you know, those are my concerns, but I will support the motion.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Perush?
Ajax is one of the big construction companies here in Michigan who does the major work on the freeways. There's John Carlo, there's Ajax, there's PK, and there's maybe 2 or 3 others that bid on some of those really huge projects that you, as you drive by the orange barrels, you kind of swear at the equipment as you're scrunched into one lane as you're going down I-75. And I, having been reading the paper over the weekend, is the types of construction work that is going to take place this summer, starting this spring on 696 and I-75, not only the projects that they had anticipated, but also the new projects that they have had to handle because of the deterioration of the pavement. For example, on 696, it's flying up and hitting people's windshields and so on. Those are new projects that they never anticipated. So my guess is that all of these construction companies, including Ajax, are happily bidding merrily on a lot of these new construction projects. So my fear would be that if we were to go out for bid on this, not only would we incur the additional administrative costs, but we would get nowhere near the good prices that we're going to get with what we've negotiated for a modification of the existing contract with Ajax, just given the road construction milieu this year. It would be different, I think, if this were a smaller contractor, but Ajax is one of the big guys. We're going to see their trucks out there on one of these freeways on multiple occasions. So my sense is that we're getting a good deal here, and they've done good work for us in the past. They've been around for a long time, and I think this is the way to go.
Yeah, I'll just add I'll take Mr. Callahan's word. I'll stop short of saying decades of experience. But Mr. Callahan does have decades of experience. So, like you said, they've done a good job on this contract. It seems like it was bid out. I mean, it was bid out originally. the price changes here for the modification, meet the test of reason. There is the risk that it could be much higher, to Commissioner Perucha's point. And I think even though it does cost a few $1,000s, to administer the bidding process, there's also that opportunity cost. And I think right now, our community is laser focused on getting our roads repaired, getting them done as quickly as possible. We don't have unlimited resources in the city engineering department. We're not a huge city with 42 different city engineers. And I think if we originally bid this, like Commissioner LeVasseur pointed out, and we got a good price then, it's a reputable firm, and these price adjustments are well within reason. If not, we think they might be, there's a chance they could go up, and we're not compromising our timing, and we're gonna get the work we need to get done so our residents can have the roads that they deserve. I think this is a good choice to support this, so I'll be supporting it. All right. With that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. Okay, this brings us to item number 8, the approval of the Downtown Development Authority financing contracts. Who's going to open this up for us? I know we have.
Mr. Mayor, I can start. I'm sure there'll be other individuals that want to join in. The city and the DDA have been involved in discussions for a long period of time about potential support from the DDA for the financing of the proposed Royal Oak City Center project. In fact, the development agreement that the city has entered into with Central Park Development Group for that, for Central Park's portion of the project, provides that the execution of an agreement between the DDA and the city for the financial support of the city's part of that project, the financing of the city's part of that project, is a condition precedent to the party's obligation to close. So, again, there have been extensive discussions. A couple weeks ago, the DDA has approved 2 agreements relative to support for the financing for the project itself. At the risk of oversimplifying things, there are 2 separate agreements. One deals with the issuance of limited-term general obligation bonds for the city's portion of the project, that is the City Hall, the police station, and the park. The DDA has agreed that for a period of 25 years or until the bonds are either paid off or defeased, that they would contribute an amount of $737,000 per year towards the debt service on those bonds. In addition, there are also separate bonds, revenue bonds, that would be issued that are supported or based upon the revenues that are actually generated by the city's parking system. And in terms of the bonds that would be issued, which would be for a total of up to $18 million of revenue bonds, $40 million of limited tax general obligation bonds, $18 million of revenue bonds. The DDA has committed that if for some reason, the unlikely reason, that the net revenues of the city's parking system were not sufficient to satisfy the debt obligation on the revenue bonds, the DDA would be responsible for payment of half of the revenue on those the debt on those revenue bonds. So there is some give and take, some quid pro quo, if you will, here in consideration for the DDA agreeing to make those payments in support of the issuance of the bonds. The DDA does have an existing obligation to pay the debt service on the bonds for the South Lafayette parking deck as of this year. Half, okay. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Half of the debt on the South Lafayette parking deck. As of later this year, that obligation on behalf of the DDA would cease. That is, it would then become the city's sole responsibility to pay the entire debt obligation. In addition, there is an agreement in place between the city and the DDA whereby the DDA would be paying the city the amount of the appraised value of the property that's being developed by Edison, which is, I believe, roughly about $1 million. And if this agreement is approved, then the DDA's obligation to make that payment to the city would then be null and void. So again, there is some give and take. Counsel Bob Schwartz is here from Dickinson Wright. Bob is the one who negotiated these agreements with counsel for the DDA. DDA Chair Jay Dunstan is also here. If you have any questions about the agreement, I'm sure either one of those gentlemen would be happy to answer those for you. I'm sure Mr. Johnson could provide additional information as well. But we would recommend approval of the proposed agreements, the two separate agreements, one for the limited tax general obligation bonds, the other for the approval of the agreement regarding the revenue bonds.
Questions for Mr. Gillum, Mr. Johnson, or even Mr. Dunstan? Commissioner LeVasseur?
My questions kind of go beyond the scope of what we can accomplish here today. So I'm simply going to make a motion that we put this matter over for 2 weeks. There's a lot of financial information I'd like to see first before we proceed. And I have to thank our city manager, Mr. Johnson. I gave him an extensive list of questions, and he provided me with answers. But I'd like to see, I'd like to see the math, how the dollars work with regard to the parking fund, with regard to the DDA's budget, how this all plays together in anticipation of the additional tax revenue that the DDA will take in from the proposed new developments, as well as how this all interplays with the debts that are forgiven for the DDA, such as the $1 million for the property that Edison is currently building on, as well as, if I understand correctly, roughly $220,000 per year that's being forgiven for the next 8 years that the DDA currently pays to the city general fund for the Lafayette parking structure. So that's my motion. Let's put this over to the next meeting. Let's get those numbers from city staff before we make a decision here.
We have a motion by Commissioner LeVasseur. Is there support?
I'll second that.
Supported by Commissioner Gibbs. Any discussion? Commissioner Dubak?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I don't see any reason to delay on this further. This deal is months and months and months in the making. We're all pretty familiar with the numbers that, at least the top line numbers that we're discussing here. This is well in line with what we were wanting to agree upon with the DDA when we originally approved the deal, and the overall deal for the Civic Center depends on this agreement with the DDA. And so I think we've gotten to a good place where it's going to be a positive benefit for both of us. I think at the end of the day, what was the number, Mayor? About $3 million in revenue to Lafayette, and the value of Etkin is what the city gives up in exchange for, over the next 30 years, about 18.5 from the DDA. Those numbers work for me. There is some give and take on the parking revenues, and we share a little bit of that risk. But I think that this is a completely acceptable deal. I understand it. I understand the numbers. I'm ready to move forward, so I'll be voting no on this motion.
Okay. Any other discussion? Commissioner Macy?
I also feel that I've had plenty of time to review the numbers which are available, and we had time to talk to bond counsel, and we can ask questions of them now. I feel like my questions have been answered satisfactorily, and this is a good deal for us.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Douglas?
Yeah, I just point out that, sometimes we as commissioners operate on a short timetable. We'll get an agenda item perhaps a week before, a little bit in advance of when it's published. I know our city manager, our city finance director, our city attorney, and our bond counsel are available to us, any of us who want to call and get clarification or additional information before a meeting. I, as Commissioner DeBuck and Commissioner Macy, have reviewed the materials, have had time to go over it, have asked my questions, and I'm very satisfied with the information I was able to receive.
Okay. All right, with no further discussion, I'll just remind everyone the motion on the table is to delay for, I think you said a couple weeks, right? Okay, 2 weeks. Commissioner LeVasseur's motion is to delay this for 2 weeks, and that's the motion on the table. Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
All right, the motion fails. Commissioner Douglas.
I will make a motion to approve the agreement with the DDA to finance the general revenue bonds, the financing contract, and authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute both contracts on behalf of the city, subject to final review and approval by bond counsel and the city attorney.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Douglas. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Perush. Discussion? Commissioner Douglas?
No, I feel this has been adequately discussed.
Okay. Any other discussion? Commissioner LeVasseur?
Yeah, I just want to get a couple clarifications with regard to the proposed contracts. First, with regard to the obligation, let's go with the revenue bond obligation. My understanding is that particular contract with the DDA would basically require the DDA to pay any shortfall in parking revenue that's needed to cover the revenue bonds for the parking structure. And I just want to confirm with our city attorney that that's an accurate statement.
Commissioner, I'll defer to Mr. Schwartz on that question.
I'm sorry, we were engaged.
I'd be happy.
Mr. Schwartz, can you come up to the podium so we can hear you? There's just a question regarding the covenants surrounding, well, I'll let Commissioner LeVasseur ask the question so I don't misinterpret.
Certainly, thank you very much. My understanding is currently, as it's written, the contract with regard to the revenue bonds basically provides that if there's a shortfall, if our parking revenues are insufficient to cover the bonds for the building of the new parking structure, that the DDA would pay half of the shortfall, provided that their revenues are otherwise sufficient to pay that. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
All right, what happened, where would the other half come from?
It would have to be an increase in rates that the commission would have to approve. I can't imagine the circumstances under which the rates would not have covered, because we know the fixed debt service. So the commission will know well in advance what the rates have to be year to year. And the only other source of revenue is an increase in the rates, because the contract the city has with bondholders is to pay the bonds solely and only from revenues of the system.
Now, wouldn't a change in rates, wouldn't those funds go directly to the parking fund in that instance?
Yes.
So that would necessarily mean it's a sliding number that the DDA is paying, because if you, let's say you have a deficit of, let's just pick a number, $200,000. You need to make up $200,000, $100,000 would come from the DDA. But if the rates are raised to $100,000, then that's going to the parking fund. Now you don't have a deficit of $200,000 anymore. So.
Interesting question. If the rates were raised, the DDA wouldn't have to pay $100,000. They would pay less.
Would the taxpayers be obligated?
No.
Or the general fund to pay this?
No. It's abundantly clear, both in the authorizing resolution of the commission and the DDA contracts. There's no one but the parking system responsible for paying those bonds.
All right, so the contract does not mandate, I mean, there may be certain expectations from the bondholders, but the contract doesn't mandate, this contract doesn't mandate that the general fund pick up the difference.
Absolutely, it does not.
And I know I have other questions here. They've escaped me for the moment, but let me regather my thoughts and I'll be there.
Contact me anytime.
Since Mr. Schwartz is up here, are there any other questions for Mr. Schwartz? Commissioner Perush?
In terms of the limited tax obligation bonds, it's my understanding, but I'm not bond counsel, that not only those bonds are also not you can't increase taxes in order to pay off those bonds if you need to.
To the extent that the city has capacity to increase taxes, if there's deficiency in bond payments, the city is obligated as a first budget obligation to increase taxes to the extent it can.
Okay, but you need to have the capacity within your.
Yes, it's already been voted.
Okay.
So as an example of that would be as if you haven't fully levied the full millage amount.
That's exactly right.
But other than that, you wouldn't be able to go beyond that.
No.
You wouldn't be able to go beyond what the voters have already approved,
Exactly
I guess
right.
is the bottom line.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess that, we've had questions, oh, you're gonna build all this stuff and then you're gonna raise our taxes. That, it doesn't sound like that can happen.
No, those are ships passing in the night.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else have questions? Commissioner LeVasseur?
My understanding is that this contract sets a floor where the city has to spend a certain amount of money on the Central Park, and we cannot go below that number.
Correct.
If I understand this correctly, it's $5 million?
Yes.
All right, and just to put that in perspective, we have a $3 million budget for a much larger park in the northern part of the city. Do you know how that $5 million number was arrived at? I mean, perhaps that number is not best for you, but for city staff, but.
It has been around city staff. I raised that very question when that $5 million was added by the DDA to the agreement, because it was not in the original agreements. And we had discussions amongst all of the construction crew within the city and the police chief and city manager and the finance director about whether the city can pay or should pay $5 million for the park. And it was concluded only a couple of weeks ago, and Mr. Johnson can speak to the numbers, that there's no question that the park will cost $5 million.
Okay. Commissioner Prush.
I guess to follow up on that question, my sense is that that number is as high as it is because that includes demolition of the existing buildings. Do you know if there was discussion and inclusion of that within it or in other infrastructure that is necessary?
Yeah, but the real reason it's there is the DDA, I think, wanted to ensure that most of what they were paying was going for the actual construction of a park, not for strictly underground infrastructure.
Oh, so they wanted to black out a large amount so that we wouldn't spend it on anything else?
Yes, yes. They wanted to see something tangible for their money. Yep.
Okay.
Actually specified in the revenue bond contract in the recitals what that $5 million is comprised of. And I don't remember offhand exactly what those costs are, but that was added at the last minute because we wanted evidence that we would have those costs. And we've been assured that the city will be incurring those costs.
I mean, I'll just add, I think this is a good contract. I think that, both parties are getting something out of this deal. Clearly, the mission and vision and purpose of the DDA is to continue to spawn not only business in the downtown, but interest in the downtown and keep it vibrant and healthy. And I think in particular with the discussion on the park, it makes absolute sense if they're, netting in $15 million into this project, that, they should be assured that it seems fair and equitable that they'll get a park out of it that is of a nature that will attract thousands of people, which will patronize our businesses. Just as the young woman came here today asking about signs, help us out, what are you doing? Well, these are examples of things that, when you bring and you have a feature like this in your downtown, it will certainly stimulate significant economic activity. Not to mention, joining the park, the 150,000 square foot Class A office building, which will be driving incremental revenue for the DDA, which then is, through this agreement, is offsetting the cost of our public portion of this project. So to represent it in simple terms, if the police station, the city hall, the park, the infrastructure around it is going to cost $40 million, the DDA is netting in $15 million of that. It means we're getting these features for $25 million because of the Class A office space, and we're getting buildings that are actually going to save us money as well in the future and be more environmentally friendly, which would drive that price in the long run down as well. So to me, this is a equitable contract. It's not that we're trading anything, but both parties are succeeding with it. And the DDA is carrying out its purpose, and of course, the city is going to carry out our purpose to enhance quality of life for all our residents here in this area and protect our property values and protect and diversify our tax base. So it's a good deal, in my opinion. Okay. Commissioner LeVasseur.
And this question would be more for city staff. First question, the site for the Central Park, how many acres is that? 2 acres?
About.
Well, the commission's probably seen the site, I don't know how many acres it is. It's basically the City Hall, police building property from 3rd Street on the south end, Troy Street on the east end, up to the library walkway over to what is Williams. I don't have an acre or square footage number for you, but that's the park portion of the.
I believe Commissioner Perush is indicating that it's 2 acres, that,
That's
more.
my recollection.
More or less 2 acres. And next, with regard to the time frame, I know a lot of people in town are very curious as far as the time frame for when we anticipate breaking ground for the parking structure, for the Central Park Development office building, for the police station, if Mr. Johnson could share that with the public.
Well, right now, the plan is for the initial groundbreaking to be mid-April.
On which aspect?
That would be for the city, it would be the parking structure. Central Park plans to be on the same schedule for the office building. The police station, what did we say, we're looking at May? June 1st. And City Hall will probably be a couple months behind that.
A couple concerns I have, and I appreciate the information on the size of the park being roughly 2 acres. And I note that Normandy Oaks is 40 acres, if I recall correctly. That's 20 times the size and roughly 60% of the budget. And so I certainly would like to see a lot more of what in the world we're spending $5 million on before we commit ourselves to the DDA that we have to spend $5 million when we're struggling to find funds for a splash pad for Normandy Oaks.
Commissioner Perush.
I was appointed to the task force for the downtown park. And speaking for myself, just myself, and we haven't started meeting yet because it's too preliminary, I have no intention of authorizing spending $5 million in amenities for a 2-acre park. That makes no sense whatsoever. I'm assuming the number is as large as it is because the DDA wanted to build in a cushion to make sure that we didn't divert revenues that should be put into a park someplace else. But secondly, I'm also anticipating that that includes the cost of demolition of these 2 buildings. I could be wrong, but my sense is that it includes those demolition costs. And those demolition costs, especially for the police building, are going to be pretty extensive. They're old buildings. You've got a gun range down in the basement, which has all kinds of environmental issues. This building was built in 1952. I have no ideas what's in the walls, but my guess is there's going to be a little bit of asbestos in there. So demolition of this building is not going to be a piece of cake either. So I'm anticipating that though those demolition costs are built into that $5 million number. But on the other hand, if the DDA is saying to us effectively, you have $5 million to spend on this park, I have no intention of spending $5 million on this park. That's crazy. So.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner LeVasseur.
The thing, though, is the contract doesn't say we have $5 million. The contract says we have to spend at least $5 million, and that's my concern. And I certainly don't want to make assumptions as to where that $5 million is going to go. And I certainly would want to know how much is anticipated for the demolition, how much is anticipated for this feature, that feature, and not put ourselves, handcuff us. If we find some way where we can have a park we're happy with for $3.5 million, I'd want to do that and not have to be obligated to spend another $1.5 million, which this contract requires us to spend.
Commissioner Macy.
So in the contract here, it has $726,000 for design work, $3.9 million for the park, and $500,000 for park fixtures. But I'd also be interested in hearing what Mr. Dunstan has to say about what the DDA has in mind about this.
Mr. Dunstan, do you mind coming to the podium?
So our concern initially was that it was understood that whatever money was left over from the project by the time it was time to build the park was what was going to be left to build the park. So if that was $100,000, that was going to be it. So our thought was, in looking at numbers supplied by city administration, which was actually a little over $5 million, if we put the mark there at $5 million, it seemed like a fair amount based on their numbers. As far as Normandy Oaks, we're the DDA, our mission's downtown. Whether $3 million is not enough for Normandy Oaks, it's too much, it's immaterial to what we looked at for what's going on here. So the $5 million amount we put in there based on numbers we saw from the city, and that's kind of where we're at.
If I could add to that, the original request that came from the city to the DDA was related to the component that was labeled park and site connectivity. You will see that term in the agreement, and it references a $10,936,000 dollar amount. That's the portion of the project that doesn't, I mean, it's the streetscape elements, it's the utilities, it's the stormwater, it's moving lines. It's not the parking deck, it's not City Hall, it's not the police station. It's the connectivity part as well as the park, so how everything connected together. The DDA in the direction given was they wanted to make sure that the connectivity portion, the underground utilities and some of the other street work that was going to be done didn't eat up all of that $10,900,000. So they asked that $5 million of it be allocated specifically to help with the actual park component as defined in the concept that I think the commission has seen. You've seen the chart with Area 1, Area 2, Area 3, and each one of those had its own description from Plant Moran. And out of the total bond amount, the budget allocation for the park and site connectivity was, as I indicated, $10,900,000. What they're asking for is to assurance that there's a dollar amount left of $5 million to cover the park. And it is described in there in terms of, again, based on Plant Moran's budgets that staff has been working with them on, is slightly over that is being allocated towards the park. So the rest would go to moving underground utilities, burying electrical lines, and doing some of the streetscape work.
Commissioner Dubak.
Yeah, so I understand the DDA wants to ensure that we're building a park that meets the expectations of the project that we've been building up for the public and in our negotiations with each other. I'd assume if somehow we found out that we can build a world-class, everyone's dream park for $3.8 million, we could come to the DDA and discuss amending the contract.
I would imagine it's probably more a question for the attorney, but, absolutely. You know. So, what I will tell you about this is, and Mr. Johnson and Mr. Twing can back me up on this, is we've spent like 7 months going over these two documents, and innumerable meetings, and innumerable back and forth with our counsel and Mr. Schwartz. We've run up some pretty good legal bills. So I will tell you that every leaf has been turned over in this, and I'll be happy to see it come to an agreement between the DDA and the City Commission. We love the project. We're comfortable with what we've negotiated on our end. I hope you're comfortable with it as well. Mr. DeBuck, I would agree with your statement. We wanted to make sure that we didn't end up with a big plat of grass and a concrete turtle.
All right. We can do better than that.
Okay. Two
turtles. Two turtle doves.
Two crystal turtles.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Dunstan? Yes, this discussion was brought up about the parallel between Normandy and this downtown park. I mean, the way I view it, and I think it's the right way to view it, is, I mean, these are two separate projects going on in the community. They have two different sources of funding. They have two different sources, or two different purposes. I think the DDA's source of funding of chipping in $18 million to the project is different than when we went with Normandy Oaks and we sold off the acreage to gain $3 million. So it's two completely different projects, and it's great that we have both of them, and it's great that we have a DDA that you know, is forward-thinking and making sure that that the downtown just isn't all skyscrapers and streets and sidewalks, but that we have and will add much needed green space to actually an area of town that, quite frankly, doesn't have green space. FYI, people live in downtown. They live near downtown. There's kids there. You know, it's not, I mean, this is a great feature for them, and it is gonna be more expensive to build on concrete than it is to put features on, you know, acres of green grass. So, there's a lot of differences here, and we shouldn't, you know, try to equivocate, too much. This project isn't, in any way, shorting Normandy Oaks, because there's no way that we would ever have the funding from this to offer to Normandy Oaks. This is something that the DDA is doing for their purpose and their budget and their funding to put into this park, and Normandy Oaks is far outside the downtown district. So two apples, oranges, but both great projects, and I'm excited about both of them, specifically this one. So if there's no other discussion, I'm gonna call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, the motion passes.
Mayor Fournier,
Commissioner
that
Pruitt.
was the motion for the contract for the limited tax obligation bonds, or was it both contracts together?
Well,
It was,
let's relook at the resolutions here.
it's the three-part resolution.
The three-part resolution,
Right, yeah.
That would be for both contracts.
Yep.
If it was the provided resolution.
Yep, the LTGO bonds and the Series 2018 revenue bonds is the second one. So they're mentioned in there. They're mentioned specifically in the resolution, so we're safe.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure that
Good.
it covers both of them.
Okay. That brings us to item number 9, the Historic District Study Committee 2017 Annual Report. Ms. Cleveland.
My name is Ruth Griffith, and I live at 402 North Troy Street, and I am the chairperson for the Historic District Study Committee and the Historic District Commission. I have something for each of you tonight that we have assembled to make it a little easier so that each of you will know. I'll get one for you later. Okay, if you don't mind. Hi. I'm getting ready to go to sleep. Huh? You want to pass?
I'll pass them
I
so you
think-
can keep going.
I think we have enough for everybody.
Okay.
Go ahead. See this thing.
Got one more here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Sorry. No.
That I gave you will also give you all the places that have been designated historic in the city. One of the things that I would like to say is that it has been my pleasure to work with the people on both these committees. They have worked so hard, and especially the study committee, because it sometimes takes us 7 to 8 months in order to assemble the material that is necessary in order to meet the requirements of the state. So not only do things have to be looked at in Royal Oak, but out in Oakland County and wherever else. Also, we go to the property and we literally go through it from the basement to the ceiling, inside and out. We photograph it, we measure it, we look for at least 50% of the property has to meet the original standards. So things can be built onto these places, but we still have to look for more than 50%. And in this last year, we have done a few things. First of all, a lot of people were confused. The people who want to have their property designated historic must come before the study committee and request it. They must also then come before the city commission if the city commission is going to approve it. And as far as the Historic District Commission is concerned, they oversee only changes or other requests once the property has been designated historic. So that's why the two groups are so different. One studies it to get it designated, the other one oversees it. And we have just recently assigned so many members to oversee so many places, because sometimes changes will take place and we're not aware of them. So that primarily is what we have been doing this past year. We, as you can see, there were quite a few places that we have done. And unless you have any questions, that's about what we've done for the last year, okay?
Questions for Ms. Cleveland?
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Cleveland. Thank you for your work. Ms. Cleveland, are we going to need you up here as well for the Historic District Commission report as well?
I have both of them here. I was going to give them to Melanie before I left. The only one with the Historic District Commission was the Bastogne building, but we also did one over on 4th Street called the Cure-All. That was in the old Haberman building, and we did approve that. It's called Cure-Well 4 House, and that was authorized last year. Some paint color was approved for the Bastogne building, but not the Jolly Pumpkin. The Jolly Pumpkin is under consideration right now.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you to all the efforts of the Historical District Study Committee and for the Historical District Commission for the work they do. Very interesting work, though, I imagine. Very rewarding to, I'm sure, just going through and learning. I mean, we get to see the results of your work product, but actually going through it, I imagine, has to be much more interesting as well.
It is, and one thing I will say that is so nice, I have younger members on the committee and middle-aged, and then a few older ones like myself. So if there's high work to be done, like when we went over to the Baldwin Theater, we sent the young ones up.
See, that's leadership there, Ms. Cleveland, you know. Okay. So I'm trying to, I just want to make sure, because we kind of broke these up into different agenda items, but I feel like we got the Historic District Study Committee annual report, and we got the Historic District Commission annual report as well.
That was both
Okay.
Ruthie.
Yep.
They're both mine, they're here.
And then, if my eyes will follow my screen here, we have the Historical Commission Annual Report. Item number 11 on the commission. Ms. Isaacson.
How are you? Confusing.
I've said historical 907,000 times in the last minute, but I'm doing.
I have to apologize. I did not get these out on time. I'll let you pass them around. That is the reports. Including a sick mother and other things that I've been involved with. It's been a very busy month. First things first, we're going to talk about the Star House and give you the report on the Star House as it is right now. The last, as you can see, the utilities are up there. I'm still questioning the AT&T phone bill at $1,073. We're never there, except for one day a month. It's an awful high phone bill. That does not make sense to me. Mr. Johnson, I hope you could look into that, please. And also, the Civil War Day is our biggest event, and that's coming up the third weekend in May. And that was our supplies there. Toner, of course. Our biggest feature to the outside, if you haven't been by, I suggest you do it, is our new gutters. We got the half-round gutters on like the the Women's Club, excuse me, only they're faux copper, but they will not change color. They will stay copper. So they really look sharp. And we're hoping to incorporate some rain barrels into that. We're trying to become more self-sustaining instead of staying with the old light bulbs and all that. So we've changed out a lot of LEDs, et cetera, et cetera. You will notice that you have a budget amount used, and you will also notice the roots account used. You will also see the deposit of the ghost hunts was $1,170 this year, which is pretty good. Our first ghost hunt, because Mr. DeBach was so interested in it, is April 21st of this year. And we have yet to schedule the rest of them, but we will get there. Different things that were bought for the kitchen is in the remodeling state. I'm sure I have talked to Carol Schwanger. My plans were in the building and in the building department. The kitchen will not have a stove in it. It has a antique wooden oak burning stove, kitchen stove to cook on that was purchased. It's a Windsor stove, so it is of era and from around here. Trying to find a Detroit-made wooden stove was real fun. I was not about to drive to Arizona. And the Wolverine sink has been purchased. That was made in Grand Rapids. It is of era. It is of a 1915. It's a stainless, or a steel painted sink. It's really good. So we're asking today, basically, for the finishing of my kitchen. The building department has approved our plans. I'm letting you know there is no working stove in the building. There will be a little mini fridge that'll be hidden in a nice cabinet compartment below. You won't see it. Right now, Pat Perush was recently there, and so was Miss Gibbs. Our kitchen right now is 1960 plywood era cabinets. They don't scream 1915, 1845. I would really like to get this house done. I'm asking permission to finish the kitchen today.
Commissioner Dubak.
Sorry, is there a budget for that, proposed for that?
Yep, it was already in our budget for this past year, and right now it's going to cost us $18,000. We are moving plumbing and heating and some electrical, getting rid of some electrical out of there.
Well, what is the process for approving something like that? Does the board have authority, or do designs have to come to the commission? What is that process?
Typically, if it's already budgeted, you just follow the normal purchasing procedures of the city. The commission would actually approve the expenditures, when they appear on the warrant list. If there's anything that needs to be bid, the commission would be reviewing and
we already went through the bidding process, so.
Yeah, so Ms. Isaacson, to be clear, it's in the budget. You went through the bidding process. We just need to execute the purchase orders so you can get your work
So
done.
I can tell my contractor to come up here and pull his permits.
There's some opportunity for him to get paid to get for his work, right? Okay. Yeah, I think that's a fair request. We should be able to, if all the ducks are in a row and you guys have all your paperwork.
Let me tell you, contractors are so much fun to deal with.
Oh, yeah.
Noticed, huh?
So this should be good to move forward, correct?
Yeah, I think so. So I don't think there's any action necessary other than, keep us apprised. And if there's a hiccup, let us know and we'll try to figure out what it is. Like with every construction project, who knows what's gonna pop up and,
I hope not. Just a simple rewiring of a lighting fixture. We found this lovely huge beam that we didn't know was there. Nice oak beam. The second thing I'm here for is actually, again, on the Almond Star Outreach meeting we had. I sent this to Carol Schwanger. I hope you all received it. It was written for you guys just to know what was going on, and the main thing that we suggest for the Almond Star property, number one, it's never been physically studied by the city. You're protecting two properties, two different entities here that are highly significant historically. You got the trail, and then you got the Almond Star house. The trail's older than the house, right? So we're hoping that you would actually have that study done. Typically, they don't like to do it without the owner's permission. However, by the deed restriction, that house is supposed to be open during certain times of the year, and it hasn't been. So I'm hoping that you would let the HDSC to do their job and do the study on that. What we suggested from the public meeting was the Star be turned into a learning center for children, the Almond Star. We're hoping the city purchases it. This would be strike 3, folks. We've dropped the ball twice on this one, strike 3. A museum, a community house, rent it out for continued offices. I don't know if the city wants to get into the rental business. Or actually moving the Orson Star house onto that property and doing something similar to what Troy did with their farmhouse out on 16 Mile Road. If you move the Star house, I want every one of you there marking every stone, because I am not going to be putting it back together. I just can't imagine doing that, but anyway. So that is our suggestion to you. I know there has been nothing else given on a Star House. I was recently reached out to by one of the owners, and they want to talk to us again. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any bids. I don't know if Mr. Twining's got anything over there, or if Mr. Johnson or Mr. Gillum has heard anything. So that's our suggestion. If you haven't had a chance, go up there while it's open, walk through that house. It is gorgeous. And there's got to be something we can do with that land. It needs to be protected. Like I said, it's strike 2. Let's not make it strike 3. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ms. Isaacson. Commissioner LeVasseur?
Yeah, just a quick question on the AT&T charges. Is that for a landline? Is that for a security
That
system?
is just a phone. We don't, the Sonatrol is there.
Sorry, is it a landline phone or what?
Sonatrol, is that, you mean for
It's our-
security?
Yeah, that's our security.
It's our security system, and it's my understanding that it's more than just a local line, because it's the security system. It's one of their more expensive lines, because the security system is tied into it. That was my understanding, but that was from like a year ago, so I don't know whether something has changed.
Is there an updated system that the city uses that would be cheaper? I mean, I think $1,073 for something that you walk in and hit a keypad for. That's a lot of money.
Commissioner DeBuck? This is 8 months worth of phone bills, right? Because this is for fiscal year.
That's for the year.
Not 2018 calendar year, it's your fiscal year, right?
No, 2000, the last budget year.
So June,
It's about $80
Right.
August, $80 a month.
yeah, you're looking at about like $100 a month,
For a
which,
line that's not used, that's what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying.
I don't know that AT&T does anything for less than that.
Not when your security system is tied into it. That's the thing.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it was worth a shot. I just found it kind of high. I was like, yeah.
I can have the actual invoices pulled.
Please, that would be great. I'd
Yeah.
love to see that information.
We could shop, I mean, might as well shop it around.
Exactly what they're billing you for.
Okay.
Yeah, there might be a cheaper way to go.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking security cameras and a DVR. I mean, it works for everybody else, so. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Isaacson.
No frame of reference.
We do, just because my
All right.
95-year-old parents.
That brings us down to item number 12, which is the public hearing on the Planning Commission recommendation on zoning ordinance amendments preserving and replacing existing trees, second reading. Mr. Gillum, I'll let you kick this off before we open up the public hearing, or is it?
I'm going to pass the
Mr.
baton to
Twing.
Mr. Twing on this one.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Mr. Twing will.
Let Dave do it. No, the planning commission did provide the city commission with a recommendation at your January 22nd meeting regarding an amendment to the zoning ordinance with the intent that would preserve and require the replacement of existing trees that met the definition under that for those developments that go through site plan approval. At that January 22nd meeting, the commission gave staff direction to clarify some language regarding screening around HVC units and other things. We've made those adjustments in this second reading document. Also at that meeting, you asked that this be scheduled for a public hearing as part of second reading. So that's really the item that's in front of you is the one to hold a public hearing or open the public hearing. And then second, if you're comfortable with the revisions, to adopt it on second reading.
Any questions for Mr. Twing? Okay. With no questions, we'll open up the public hearing. The same rules as public comment apply for public hearing. You have 5 minutes, and there's a timer at the podium to help you with your, keep a track of your time. So anyone here to speak tonight on this ordinance amendment? Okay, I will close the public hearing. Bring the meeting back to the side of the table. And I believe we have, yes, there they are. The resolution. Commissioner DeBuck.
Yeah, I'll move for approval on second reading.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner DeBuck. Is there a second? We have a second by Commissioner Perush. Discussion.
Sure, yeah, I think, we talked about this in some depth at first reading, and I think it's a good first step in taking a more proactive, much more aggressive tree protection stance as a city. I think we have a lot more work to do, but certainly forcing this conversation to be had in a formal way when we're doing plan unit development shows that, we're conscious of our tree count, and we want our developers to be conscious of our tree count, and that we have more trees going in every year than we had come out. So I think there's a move in the right direction. We're not quite there. There's more work to do on this front, but I think this gets at, for this section of what we do as a city, this gets at where we want to be.
Any other discussion? And I'll just echo those comments, and I think, our work's still cut out ahead of us for some of the things that we can do, that are gonna be a little bit more complicated, a little bit more, a broader community-wide discussion. But as far as the things we can implement now and make sure that our tree canopy is not an afterthought, but a pre-thought to any project that takes place in this community at a commercial level, and that comes before our planning, and that we're making sure folks are compliant, we're giving them direction of how important this is, in this regard, I think is a win. But like Commissioner Dubuck said, it's not an end-all, it's not a patch, it's just one part of our journey that we're taking here to make sure that, we have a tree canopy here for many centuries to come. So, with no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion passes. So this brings us to item number 13, approval of appointments committee recommendations. I will hand it over to the appointments committee, whoever the chair shall be. Commissioner Douglas, I saw two hands.
Yes, I'll move approval of the resolution for the 4 appointments as presented.
We have a motion by Commissioner Douglas. Is there a second? We have a second by Commissioner Macy. Any discussion? Commissioner Macy?
So this is my first time on appointments committee. It was really neat that a lot of the candidates actually came out, talked to us a little bit, answered our questions. We have some good ideas of things we want to appoint them to as openings appear in the future. So really enjoyed it, and congratulations to our 4 appointments.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, with none, I'll call.
You got a hand over there.
Oh, a hand? Where did I see a hand? Mr. Johnson.
I just want to point out something, because there were 2 candidates here that caused considerable discussion in-house in order to determine how the candidates fit in and when they'll be term limited. Mr. Sage served on Board of Review previously, but he had resigned and was replaced. And it's our view that he's not a member of the Board of Review right now, so that this is a new appointment. So he's starting over from scratch. Mr. Karlowski has been a member of the Historical Commission. The Appointments Committee and the City Commission appointed somebody else to fill his position. That person declined, so the position was never filled. Our position is Mr. Karlowski is still, right now, a member of that board. So this is a reappointment.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Johnson. Okay. No further discussion. Commissioner Macy.
Does that mean we have to do something different because last time? Okay.
No, it's just, I just want to make sure that you understand how we're recording this.
Okay.
Well, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion passes. All right. This brings us down to item number 14, confirmation of mayoral appointments. Second here while it opens up. Okay. We had a couple openings to fill. On the Library Board of Trustees, Mitzi Hoffman decided to hang up the hat after a number of years. I want to personally thank Mitzi Hoffman for her contribution to the library board, to this city. I had the pleasure back in the day serving with Mitzi Hoffman on the library board, and she was a tremendous asset to the tremendous asset that the library is. So I wish her the best. Thank her so much for her service, and she'll be missed. Heather Murphy Raymond, I had an opportunity to speak with her. She'll be an excellent fit for the library. She has experience in library sciences. She's been here for a while. She's an avid user of the library, and I think for some of the next objectives that the library has, she's going to be an excellent fit and an excellent contributor as well to those decisions that will be coming up for the library board here shortly. So, with that, I'm recommending Heather Murphy Raymond for the library board. For the planning commission, we had some discussion a while back. I'm recommending our Mayor Pro Tem Douglas to continue to serve on the Planning Commission and Brownfield Committee with me. I have the pleasure of serving on that board, and I have the pleasure of serving with Commissioner Douglas on that board. And although we don't always agree or philosophically see the same way, I think that's healthy, and I also think that she is a tremendous asset as far as her knowledge, former president of the Michigan Planning Association, and I've learned quite a bit from her. And I think that given her unique experience, she should continue and maintain her position on the Planning Commission. Not every city out here can say that they have a president of the Michigan Board of Planning Commissioners on their own Planning Commission. So I think that's something very unique that we have. Commissioner LeVasseur.
I'd like to separate these two out, so I would start with a motion that we confirm the mayoral appointment of Heather Murphy Raymond to the Library Board of Trustees.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner LeVasseur. We have a second by Commissioner Dubuck. Discussion? No discussion? Okay. With that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? The motion passes. Ms. Murphy Raymond is appointed to the Library Board. Okay, that leaves us one more appointment. Commissioner Dubuck.
I'll move for the appointment of Commissioner Douglas to the Planning Committee.
We have a motion by Commissioner Dubuck. Is there a second? Second, Commissioner Perush. Discussion.
For all the reasons you said, Mayor, I think Commissioner Douglas is uniquely qualified to fill this spot. I know I'm certainly not trying to compete with her for it. We do have 3 new commissioners at the table who I think, after getting these meetings kind of under one's belt in 2 years, like midterm, maybe there's a conversation to be had, but certainly there's no question that Commissioner Douglas is an asset to that committee and to the city at that table. So I'm happy to make the motion.
Okay. Commissioner LeVasseur.
I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Douglas's service on the Planning Commission. I do have concerns, though. First of all, as was mentioned, public comments. She's been on that Planning Commission a long time. I do believe it's appropriate to get a fresh perspective in there. I do have some concerns with her approach on high-density, low parking type of plans, which she seems to approve quite frequently as a member of the Planning Commission, and I do believe we need to take and have more concern with making sure that the projects that come before us have adequate parking, particularly when they're in close proximity to residential areas.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Macy?
So I pretty much agree with what Commissioner Dubuck said here. As I've said before, I think limiting how the movement of the committees among the commission is not a great idea. I think once the term limit is up, then it makes sense to be rotating around. I do agree that Commissioner Douglas has qualifications that none of the rest of us can boast. But I do think that we're missing opportunities to have other voices on that. I don't think I'm qualified necessarily to be there yet, especially right now as we have the master plan coming up in the next year or two. I think we need her voice there. But I would like to see a little movement on the next time around.
Any other discussion? Yeah. I mean, I'll just echo what I said. I think she's very uniquely qualified. I know she brings significant experience and vision to the Planning Commission. I know that we don't always agree on everything, but we agree on a number of things. As it relates to some of the density issues, projects that we've passed in this community that have made it a really attractive place to work and live, I'm also going to side with the voters on this one that put Commissioner Douglas in office a couple times. So I feel comfortable that even though we may not see eye to eye on every project, but with the backing of the voters the last couple times around, they know her decision-making when she was on Planning Commission. They've known it when she's been a commissioner on Planning Commission. So I'm going to feel comforted putting her back on for all the reasons above and getting the kicker of those who put her in office. So with that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, the motion passes.
And thanks to those who have supported me here. I appreciate your vote of confidence.
That's not going to make me agree with you all the time on the Planning Commission, even though you thanked me.
Never thought so for a minute.
All right. That brings us to item number 15, approval of voting precinct 15 relocation. City Clerk Hallis.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm bringing this forward to you because back in 2015, I asked for approval to relocate Precinct 15 that was previously at the Judson Center, which was a great location. However, they were using the rooms that we were using for voting at the time and making them smaller areas for more classes for the children that they have there. So after reviewing that, I ended up moving the precinct to the Royal Oak Golf Club. It housed approximately 1,500 voters that we have registered to vote there. And it's a great location, but it's a little bit on the smaller side. So after the last presidential, I started looking around to see if there was anything else that I could possibly house them in. And I reached out to our fire chief after doing a little research, seeing that the fire station, which was Fire Station 4 back in the day, they were housed as a precinct from the early 1950s until the early 1980s. And the reason why they stopped continuing to be a precinct was because at the time we had 50 voting locations that were reduced to 33. So it wasn't an issue that they had a problem being a precinct, it just was a consolidation issue. So I thought at this time, maybe to move it back there would be a good idea. They have a lot more room, they have a lot of lighting. The fire men are willing to help out the workers with setup of the precinct as well. So it's also a closer location for the voters in that area. Because way back when, Parker School was always the precinct that the voters went to. So that was their precinct for a really long time. They demolished the school, and so ever since then, it's been kind of a challenge to figure out where to house those voters at. So I'm hoping this is a good solution for that. So I'm asking for your approval to move the location, and also that I can send voter cards to all the voters as soon as possible.
Ms. Hallis, that was going to be my question is, you know, the communication obviously is going to have to be pretty robust here to make sure, even on election day, because even with cards being sent out and everything like that, people are going to, you know, forget and just go to the pattern. But you have a plan, you've done this before, you got a plan in place to make sure that voters get to where they need to go, right?
Yes.
Just follow the big trucks.
Right.
Yeah, you can't mess that up. It's at the fire station. Okay, all right, now I know.
Since sirens, right?
Do we have any questions for Ms. Hallis?
That's my precinct, and I'm very grateful for this move. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. I don't know that we have a motion on the table. Commissioner LeVasseur.
I'll move that we adopt the resolution.
Okay. Okay, well, I think I'd admit, Commissioner Macy with the second on that, Commissioner LeVasseur with the motion. Any discussion? With none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the motion passes. All right.
Thank you.
Let's see, request, item number 16, request to set public hearing vacation of a portion of West Harrison Avenue.
I'll start this one off.
Okay, Mr. Johnson.
This is back to talking about the Frizard sign clock tower. We've received another request from Frizard Investment Limited Partnership and Arbor Valley Outdoor to vacate a portion of West Harrison Avenue between Woodward and the public alley. This was before the commission before, and actually one of the messier actions of the previous commission. You'll recall that it was before us on a night when we were shorthanded with commissioners, and the acting city attorney, the interim city attorney, thought we needed a majority of the membership, not a majority of the quorum. We brought that back 2 weeks later for reconsideration, and at that time, with a larger group, it was denied. Arbor Valley is basically the same proposal again. You've really got multiple options. If you wanted to do something with them to reactivate the tower, you could do it the way they're suggesting, which vacates the property and they acquire part of it. You could also do a lease agreement or a license agreement, which does not require a public hearing, but the vacation does. You could also decide that you don't want the clock tower and order it removed, or you could do nothing and would probably be back in this situation again at some point in the future. If you want to consider the vacation, we need to set a public hearing. Setting that public hearing does not commit you to that course of action. You still have all of the options available to you. I do want to stress in this situation, I put it in bold in the letter, regardless of what direction the commission wants to go with the tower, the city has absolutely no intention of reopening Harrison Avenue to through traffic, and administration will not be requesting that of the city commission. Last time around, somebody representing the petitioners went through the neighborhood telling everybody that we were going to reopen the road. We are not going to reopen the road. There is apparently some urgency to this if you want to consider the vacation, because it's my understanding that Arbor Valley's option on the property expires fairly shortly. So if we're going to proceed, if we're going to consider that option at all, we do need to set the public hearing for March 12th. There are two representatives of Arbor Valley in the audience, and you may have some questions of them.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Johnson? Commissioner Dubak.
I'm just wondering if this is there a material difference between this and the last time we addressed this, where I think one of the primary concerns raised was selling off a public asset that has value, when we could enter into a lease agreement to ensure that we had a little bit more control over the property. Is there anything that has changed substantially in that situation?
I don't believe so.
Commissioner LeVasseur.
Yeah, and forgive me if this material is already in the materials presented, but we have different owners on either side of the, of Harrison at that location?
That's correct, yeah, because part of the Frizard Clock Tower is located on property that's owned by the Frizard entity, and then part of the clock tower is located on what's actually city property at this point in time.
Okay, if I understand correctly, if we vacate it, half of the roadway would go toward the northern owner, half would go to the southern owner?
That's correct, yes.
Right, and I'm just wondering if there's any setback issues or any encroachment issues that we're creating by approaching in this fashion.
Yeah, but Mr. Landry from Arbor Valley is here. He indicates he can answer that.
One second, Mr. Landry. I just want to make sure we don't, any more questions for staff before we call the petitioner up? Okay, Mr. Landry, come on up. Sorry, I just want to make sure we keep organized a little bit here.
I can answer that question. Technically, there would be setback issues, but not any greater than exist right now. The clock tower as it sits, I think your setback is so many feet from the public alley. It's in violation of that,
right,
as it currently stands, but the previous city commission had approved it. So by vacating the property, you don't create any new setback issues. It would just be continuing the variance, if you will, that currently exists.
Any other questions for Mr. Landry?
The clock tower, is it currently, I'm sorry, I should wait to be
Sure,
on that
no,
time.
you're fine.
The clock tower, as it presently sits, would it sit entirely on the southern portion of the vacated roadway?
Yes, what happens now is, if you will, there are four legs to the clock tower. Only, Broussard owns lots 19 and 20 of the Lawson and Storrs subdivision, and only one leg of the clock tower is on, I think, lot 19.
Yeah.
Okay, the other three legs sit on what is a vacated portion, not a vacated, I'm sorry, what is currently not used, a closed-off portion of Harrison Street. If Harrison were to be vacated, you are correct, one half would go to the southern property owner, which is Broussard. The other half would go to the north. But what needs to happen for the clock tower to remain would be my client's property.
Okay, and if I'm looking at this right, you know, that northern foot, foundation footing is about 4.8 feet away from what would then be the new border between the northern and southern property owners.
Survey. Yes, that is correct. Yes, looking at the survey, it would be 4.8 feet from the property line between what is, I believe it's a jewelry store to the north now, and the southern property owner.
Okay, thank you.
Could I make a couple comments, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Landry, you have the floor, yes.
Thank you. City manager accurately indicated the history of this. It was rather messy. We did obtain a 3-2 approval, but the former city attorney gave erroneous advice, and we ultimately lost that approval. We've come back. What's the difference now from then? What I took away from the last time we were here, when the full city commission voted no for the vacation, what I took away from that was that the city commission said we perhaps could explore a better financial benefit to the city rather than giving something up. Could we get a better deal, so to speak, for the city? We've gone back, sharpened the pencils a little bit. The one difference is with this vacation proposal is if we obtain the property, we would be willing to give the city a permanent easement to utilize the grounds as a city park, a small park, a pocket park, if you will. Then who's going to maintain it? We would be prepared to pay for that and give the city $50,000, which could be used, the income from that, to maintain the property, since the city would have an easement for its residents to use it. So we have, there is a little better financial interest in this. Let me just mention a couple other background facts, which I think the City Commission should realize. Fournier Limited Investments has no money. They're the title owners to this, but they have no money. The licensing agreement that in 1999 the City Commission entered into with Fournier says whenever the city wants to reopen the road, Fournier has to take the tower down. And it says if Fournier never maintains it, Fournier has to take the tower down. Fournier has no money to do that. In fact, the only reason the property is not in foreclosure is because my client has kept it out of foreclosure by paying the taxes for the last 3 years. We just recently made a tax payment to keep it out of foreclosure. If we don't purchase this property from Fournier is going to lose it. It's going to lose it to a tax foreclosure, and there's also a very large lien on the property by Ally Bank, okay, which is an automotive financer, okay? The other thing is, there are 2 sign permits issued by the state of Michigan for this sign. They are the last 2 that can be issued for Woodward Avenue, which is a historic roadway. There can be no others. We own those 2 permits. So nobody else can come in here and put up a clock tower sign. It can only be us. We're the only title owners of those 2 permits. So we're willing to work with the city, and however, it's going to take a substantial amount of money for us to get the clock tower up and running. And I'll lay the cards on the table and let you know exactly what it's going to cost us. For us to rehabilitate the north and the south electronic faces, it costs $125,000 per face for the new digitals that are the state-of-the-art automatic dimming. There is certain brightness in the day. When it gets dark, they dim down to limit the bleeding, if you will, of the lights on the neighbors. That's going to cost $250,000 to do that. It's going to cost us $50,000 to stabilize the structure and to also remove the facade, and we've offered in this deal to include the City of Royal Oak's new branding on the tower. Now that takes us up to $300,000. In the proposal we've made, we would pay $50,000 to the city to pay for the maintenance. We would also redo all the landscaping on this property. That adds up to about $400,000. Our purchase agreement with Fournier is we have to pay them $250,000. There's a huge lien on the property from Ally Bank. So that's a $650,000 investment that my client would be making in this property. The current licensing agreement that the city has with Fournier provides that whenever the city wants to reopen the road, Fournier has to take it down. We can't agree to that because we're investing $650,000. If the city should decide they want to open the road, we're out $650,000. We can't do that. There's been some discussion of what about a lease. The reason we have hesitated with a lease is because of that massive financial investment we're making. Now, if the city wants to explore a lease, a long-term lease with us, we can explore that, but it would have to be like 30 years. It had to be a really long-term lease, which sounds like a lot of time, but we're already 20 years, 19 years from 1999 that the signs have been up there. It would have to be a very long-term lease, and it would have to have clauses like if the city wanted us to take down in the first 10 years, the city would pay us X dollars. From years 11 to 20, it'd be less. From year 21 to 30, it would be less. We could explore that. However, our option ends March 15, and we're on our 4th extension. So Fournier Investments, which has now been taken over by another entity, and they're ready to let the property go. So what I would ask City Commission to do tonight is approve the public hearing for March 12, approve setting it. We're willing to talk with the city in the next 30 days. If we can come up with a long-term lease, we're happy to work with city attorney or whoever. And if we can come back prior to March 12 and we were in agreement, then there's no need for the public hearing. We've got a long-term lease, we've worked it out. If we can't, then the city commission decides do they want to vacate the property or not. But that creates a deadline. And so it's going to be done one way or another by March 12. But we have put significant dollars in the meantime into just keeping this thing up. And we're interested in moving forward. We'll be happy to talk. But just to let you know, those are the kind of terms that we're going to need to make this really a viable financial option for us.
Questions for Mr. Landry? Commissioner Dubak.
Thank you. That's helpful information. I'm willing to support scheduling a public hearing, but I have two primary concerns. One is, as I said, it's currently an asset owned by the residents of Royal Oak, and vacating it when it clearly has value somehow makes me a little itchy. Second, though, is having interact with the residents there before. I know they're not eager for that sign to get turned back on. So a lease on our property, my understanding would give us a little bit more control in negotiating with the tenant of that property than our current sign ordinance would. If we vacate and now there's a sign there, our sign ordinance, I believe, would be what governs the sign. Is that accurate, Mr. City Attorney? Or would it be the one you have from the state?
It would only work if we had an operating agreement. Currently, there's a licensing agreement that controls the terms rather than the sign ordinance. It's almost like a variance, if you will. Okay. There's a current licensing agreement entered in that, which we can't advertise tobacco or sexually explicit things, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. There would be another operating agreement. That I would like to hammer out in the next 30 days. So it would all come back at one time with either a lease or a vacation. But I would advise you, and I'm not your attorney, to have all that hammered out, hopefully, or at least something to bring to City Commission, that's got some meat on it, to decide the whole thing at once. I would expect to do all of that.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner LeVasseur.
Does the debt to Allied, does that exceed the purchase price?
No.
Okay. All right, so no short sale situation. You don't have to go on begging on your knees to the lender here to close this deal.
No, we can close the deal with Fournier, and they can pay Ally Bank. They're out from underneath that debt. We would have to pay some additional money to get the property, but not a ton of money out of it only gets foreclosed upon if it's 3 years in arrears. We keep paying the third year so that the county doesn't foreclose on the property.
Well, I'm referring to the mortgage debt, to Allied. That I'm
Our
referring
purchase,
to.
I'm sorry, our agreement with Fournier, our purchase agreement exceeds the mortgage debt to Ally.
Right, so it's not a short sale situation?
No.
Okay.
No.
Any other questions for Mr. Landry? Okay. I'll just reiterate, I think, Commissioner Dubak historically or accurately put out there what our view was, when this was brought up in 2016. It's a community asset, the property's there. We're not looking to extort anyone, but we want, if we're giving up rights in the term of a lease or something like that, we're looking to, in some way, make our taxpaying residents collectively who own that property, I'll say whole or reasonably appreciated for, granting such use of that property. So I'm perfectly okay granting, this window here to schedule a public hearing, because I think, the facts are, I think everyone understands what the facts of the situation are, but I do think it comes down to, if this is going to get any legs or traction behind it, is working out some of these details that that would, look favorably from the city's perspective. So, and I think we can get there. There's a potential that we can have something that we could vote here at this body, but, clearly that's up to both parties being reasonable, so.
Understood.
We don't want to, I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no for my vote, but, there's no reason why we have to wash it, right now, but again, this will probably be the last opportunity, right? Even if you guys continue to extend or favorably, you know, we don't want to continue to spend countless hours working on this if we can't come to terms on what we need to do. So we'll give it a shot here. I think, I don't know, we'll see what the vote says, but, you know, I sense we'll give it a shot. And hopefully, you know, both parties will continue to negotiate in good faith. Commissioner Gibbs?
I have a question. The property is currently owned by the city, correct? As a portion of it.
One
A
leg.
portion of it, I should say, is owned by the city. The other portion is owned by Fassard. So if the vacated property, would it be acquired by this, so it would be generating a tax base then?
No, we can't actually sell the property when we vacate. It would be, the land would be split in half to the two adjacent property owners. And then
Just
it
what I
becomes
wanted
theirs,
to
yeah.
clarify.
It would add to the taxable value of the property, is what she's asking.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I guess the property would be worth more, marginally more, yeah.
Marginally, but as value of property increases, the tax
Right.
rate.
And I think the other point we wanted to make too is like, we don't know in 50 years, 30 years, 20 years, what the transportation situation is gonna be on Woodward. I mean, we have autonomous cars, flying cars. You know, Mr. Johnson will be around for another 30, 40, 50, 60 years too, so we don't know what his decisions are gonna be, you know, but,
By then, you'll be older than me.
that's true. But, I mean, we don't know, and I think that's one thing we also wanna, reiterate to you is that, look, we don't know what's gonna happen in transportation, bus transit, you know, and so, you know, giving away that, control to open up Harrison, not that we ever would, we have no plan, we would never in today's state do it, but let's just say Woodward gets folded up, becomes a greenscape, and we want to do something interesting, I don't know, that benefits the residents of that neighborhood. Because clearly right now the option is keep a tower there that, you know, has a display that illuminates light out, and, you know, that's not always, I mean, it's nice to have a park there and everything, but the clock tower isn't, you know, the greatest thing to have in your backyard. It is, you know, better than what was there. But, you know, 50 years from now, 30 years from now, that's the way we're thinking. We just passed a Second Amendment on a tree ordinance. This commission, I'm very proud of our work here because we are, you know, not just looking at what's in front of us next week, but we are looking what's in front of us the next century. So we got to be very jurisprudent and careful about every decision we make. But I do think that if we're creative and we work together, we can find opportunities that work for everyone in our community. So the neighborhood, most importantly, you know, making sure we have flexible options and that, you know, there's benefit to all. So, Commissioner Dubak.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll move to set the public hearing for March 12th.
We have a motion by Commissioner Dubak. We have a second by Commissioner Macy. Discussion? Commissioner Dubak?
So yeah, just to put a cap on it, yeah, I want to say, I'm willing to have the public hearing to, you know, hear from the residents and hear their concerns about the sign going back on. I want to make sure that we're addressing, you know, whatever they might raise in a public hearing. And then see what kind of deal we can work out with the petitioner, whether it's a lease, whether it's vacation, with them making some investments in the property with guarantees over years of maintenance of that property. So this, I guess, gives staff the green light to go ahead and start having those conversations, correct?
Commissioner LeVasseur.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and Mr. Gilm can answer this, whether we need to give any further direction so that if there's some option other than vacating that may be preferable, that we're prepared to move forward at that meeting with either vacating it or whether it's a lease or a license or some other choice, making sure we're given proper direction today and authority today for Mr. Gilm to move forward.
Mr. Gilm, this will be discussed because it's a property issue in closed session, right?
We could do that. I mean, I can keep you posted between now and then as to the status of the discussions that I have with Mr. Landry regarding the property also.
Okay, so you don't need a resolution from us at this time?
No, I don't think so. What I would ask, though, in the meantime, if you have, any of you have any specific thoughts or ideas that haven't been discussed at the table tonight, maybe you can just convey those to me directly.
That's a good idea.
Either call me or send me an email if there are particular things that you would like to look for in terms of whatever kind of alternative arrangement that we might try to work out with Arbor and Mr. Landry, so.
What would be very useful if the commissioners actually simply desire to get rid of the tower, it would be helpful for us to know that now.
We don't want to waste anybody's time. I don't know how everyone feels on the issue, but Mr. Johnson did bring that up as an option, so I think that's be fair to the petitioner, be fair to, So if that is something you're considering, probably should make it well-known to city staff. Commissioner Macy?
I guess it seems like you're asking for an answer right now, but I feel like I'm not considering it until I find out what the result of the negotiations are, if we can come to a reasonable.
Either or.
Right, like.
You never know, some people are.
That's fair, but I mean, there have been at times people on this commission who were just absolutely opposed to digital signs.
I'm staring at you.
We get new curtains? Oh, fun. All right. So we have a motion on the table to schedule a public hearing, some work that needs to be done. The good news is we have, I think, the state's best city attorney and the state's second best city manager. And so I feel pretty confident we can call for a vote right now. And just to echo too, for the people out there, you know, I think it's going to be really good that our residents in that area will have the opportunity to come out and speak their mind and, you know, digest and process some of this information. So, you know, we make sure we make a decision that's in the best interest of everyone. So, okay. With that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we'll have a hearing March 12th. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. That brings us down to discussion of creating Senior Services Aging in Place Task Force as requested by Commissioner Dubak, Commissioner Macy, and Commissioner Gibbs. I will open this up to Commissioner Dubak, I believe, was the one that first wrote the correspondence, so I will allow him to open it up.
Thank you, Mayor. So we had some great public comment on this this evening, and I think that was very much in the vein of what we're trying to address here. So, you know, we've had plenty of conversations at this table about the silver tsunami, about the aging about the growing aging population, and the need to not just better meet the needs of our seniors right now. We should always be striving to improve services. But again, having that 10, 20, 50, 100-year outlook and making sure that we're planning for the future. So what I'm proposing is, there was mention of the Senior Citizen Advisory Board that previously existed that's been folded in to the Parks and Rec. But what I'm thinking is something more along the lines of a task force with specific objectives to come back with specific recommendations within a specific time frame. Now, whether or not that evolves into a standing board to oversee the implementation of those elements, you know, would I guess we decide once we get a report from them. But I think there's a few things that have been raised that we know there are policy changes that we can make as far as administrative policy. There are investments we can make from an appropriation standpoint, and there are ordinances that we can pass with regard to senior-friendly housing, which absolutely aging in place does not mean necessarily downsizing or necessarily moving in to any sort of assisted living facility or even, you know, multifamily facility, but making sure that our seniors have options to meet their needs. And what we know right now is that we lack housing options. And I think most of us have heard from residents who have said they wanted to downsize from their single-family home into a condo or an apartment and just couldn't find anything that had the amenities they need at a price point that even made sense to get out of their single-family home. And that's a development issue. It's a policy issue that we can address at this table. And so we need some specific recommendations as to how to deal with that. Certainly mobility, we do have the transit task force, but as those conversations are going on, what are the needs of our seniors with regard to parking, with regard to accessing the decks, with regard to participating in all that our community has to offer, both with regard to SMART and parking. Do we have enough accessible parking or senior parking? We heard a lot about senior parking around the farmers market. And if there is indeed times or events where there is a surge of need for seniors who have mobility impairments, then, you know, do we throw up accessible parking temporarily for those events? Do our special events have enough accessible parking, or do we need to consider that? We need to consider Parks and Recreation, absolutely, and recreational opportunities. Aging in place means not just living independently, but, you know, participating in everything the community has to offer. And so Parks and Rec needs to be a part of that. And this is not to say we haven't been doing things. You know, last year we installed at 2 different parks senior exercise equipment. So it's there, you know, it's front of mind, but this is really more about laying out a deliberate citywide strategy to ensure that when we're making decisions, that this is always going to be a part of the conversation. We have specific goals we're trying to hit. Fourth, communications. It was mentioned that seniors prefer mail. That is, I think, true at the moment. But also, what are we communicating? Are they aware of all the services that exist now? I know that when we started really pushing on rehab, the housing rehab program, money just started flying out the door. And we got some earned media around it, and we started sending postcards around it, and we saw some really positive results just from raising awareness. And then lastly, just if this task force identified any other pressing needs or any other best practices that are happening in other cities that we haven't done. So that is where my head's at. I think we have to do some discussing and molding of it, but I think it makes sense in the same way that we had the water runoff task force. We have an environmental advisory board, but we gave a specific group of people with specific expertise and passion and knowledge a specific task to come back with us to talk about that ordinance, and that's how I envision this working. So for the purposes of the conversation, I'm going to move that we establish a senior citizen advisory task force on aging in place to address these 4 key objectives: housing, mobility, recreation, and communications.
A motion by Commissioner DuBuck. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Macy. Discussion. We'll let Commissioner Macy go first. That was a dead tie. It's exactly the same, but she got up on the second ahead of you.
I'm going to be quick because I think Commissioner DuBuck said it all. But this is a need that we're seeing not only in the future as we see our senior population growing, but a need that we're seeing right now is not being very well addressed. We know that it's out there. We've kind of been addressing this piecemeal, but to have a group that's looking at these issues as a whole set and trying to figure out what needs to be addressed now and different ways that we can address that, I think will be really, really valuable for our community. And I think this is a great idea. I'm on the Parks and Rec and Senior Services committee right now, and I can tell you I've only been on it for a few months, obviously, but looking back at the minutes, we don't deal with senior issues pretty much ever. So there's not really a group in the city other than us up here at the table that's really thinking about and talking about these issues, it seems. And I think this could be a really valuable addition to the services we offer our citizens.
Commissioner LeVasseur.
I believe it's an important topic for us to consider. And I just believe we need a little clarification as far as number of task force members, the manner of appointment, and how people in the public, our residents, how they can apply if they wish to participate in the task force.
Commissioner DuBuck.
Thank you, Commissioner LeVasseur. Actually, I skipped over that part. So what I had envisioned, and I'm open to suggestions, would be a 7-person task force with 1 commissioner, a person from Parks and Rec, and then 5 mayoral appointees.
Any other discussion? Commissioner LeVasseur.
I think my preference would be that rather than go through a mayoral appointment, that we go through the appointments committee, and that people who wish to participate, that they have the opportunity to fill in the applications and submit them to the city clerk so they can alert us to their interest in participating.
Commissioner Douglas.
I absolutely agree on the need to address the topic of aging. We know that by the year 2030, 25% of Royal Oak's population will be age 65 plus, and that aging process will only continue to accelerate as the baby boom generation continues to get older. This is something I campaigned on over the course of the past summer. I edit a blog whose authors write about the topic of planning and aging on a regular basis. But I disagree with the method of handling it. I don't think a task force is the right solution here. For a couple of reasons. One is, as has been said, we used to have a senior committee, and it had trouble getting a quorum, and it ultimately got folded into our Parks and Recreation, now Parks and Recreation and Senior Committee. And I would assert that the reason the committee hasn't done anything about seniors is that we haven't asked them to do anything about seniors. And as someone once said, you know, what this committee needs is a good crisis. That is a challenge. I think it's our job as city commissioners to articulate what objectives we have, what we want this process to accomplish, and to hand it over to an existing committee rather than reinventing the wheel. If that committee needs resources, experts, advisors, additional civilians to come in an advisory capacity, I think we can use a body that we have to accomplish the same results. Some of our residents may know that the city's been going through a strategic planning process. We've spent 3 long sessions as a committee, as a commission, with staff talking about the many issues that we face as a city in the coming couple years. This subject has not bubbled up into the conclusions of that process, perhaps because, at least in my mind, this is a subject that we would address as part of a master plan. It's absolutely a suitable topic to deal with in a master plan where you can deal with it holistically. So perhaps that's one of the reasons why it hasn't come to the top in our strategic planning session. Our staff looks to that strategic planning process to set its own plans and staffing needs and budgets for the coming fiscal year. So the appropriate place to me to address this issue is through the strategic planning process, adding this to the list at our last and final meeting, and asking staff to tell us what resources they will allocate to deal with it in the coming fiscal year. And I say this because in that planning session, several people at this table have made a very strong appeal that a couple of the things that the city has on its plate, particularly the Civic Center project, is going to consume a great amount of staff time and attention and budget, and that we as commissioners need to be thoughtful about what additional big projects we put on our staff. We already have a transit committee, which is addressing the need for senior transportation. We certainly have a planning commission if different configurations of housing are necessary. The planning commission is an excellent place to address that. But before we create a new task force and put new assignments on the staff, I think we need to spend more time thinking about this and see what we can accomplish it through existing structures rather than an entirely new task force.
Commissioner Perush?
I'm going to agree with Commissioner Douglas at this point, just for a lot of the reasons that she just articulated. When I first heard of the concept of the task force as it was first proposed by, you know, informal emails and so on and so forth, I thought it was just going to be limited to the issue of housing and aging in place and dealing specifically with the housing issue, because that's the issue that I hear more often than anything else, is I don't want to stay in my house anymore, but I'd like to stay in the city, but there are no options, or there's options, but there's a long waiting list. And so to the extent that the commissioner, the task force was going to be limited to that very, very specific issue, I was comfortable with that. But the way Commissioner DeBuck describes it, it sounds like it's this very, 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 very wide open, extraordinarily complicated and comprehensive look at senior life and the issues that they all face. And to me, that is a recipe for disaster. You have to narrow it. When we had the task force for Normandy Oaks, it was specifically narrowed to just the design of Normandy Oaks. When we established the task force for the stormwater issue, which I'm on, it was just to please look at the stormwater detention ordinance and bring it up to date because it's not functioning effectively now. When we established the task force for the downtown park, it was very narrowly limited to that, and it was something that the task force could handle. If you look back at the timing of all of those task forces and how long they've been operating over a year, maybe 2 years, and they're just now getting to the point where they're going to be giving some conclusions and recommendations to the City Commission, all 3 of those. So to me, the scope that is described for this task force is much, much too broad. And as Commissioner Douglas suggested, if it is strictly housing zoning issues, that can be delegated to the Plan Commission. And if you're talking about other types of senior services, other than transportation, which has already been delegated to the Transportation Task Force, we already have some programs, very widely used programs in place that go back for years. When the senior center was first thought about, which was in decades and decades ago, we were at the same point then that I think a lot of us are now, where we had a rapidly increasing aging population and not adequate services. We were feeding seniors meals through a federal program of senior meals once a day. That was in the Oddfellows Hall. That's what we were using. It was woefully inadequate. We realized at that point in time that we needed to establish a separate building, a separate area where we could provide services. And therefore, money was raised and donated, and we created the Meininger Center, which is we're all familiar with. But the building was not the only thing that we did back in those days. We realized that seniors, at least the seniors then, needed a lot of support services more than just a recreation center that they could go to or for meals during the day. And so we reached out to the Area Agency on Aging and worked with that as well as the block grant program and established two excellent programs. One is ROSES, which you're all familiar with, which is the program whereby if you need housing assistance in terms of being able to stay in your house, you need a ramp, you need bathroom modifications and so on, the city will link you up with contractors and help you make those decisions about modifications to your home so that you can stay in your home. And I took out of the budget book, that huge 400-page budget book that we all have, the numbers that we actually served in the ROSES program in 2016, which is the most recent compilation of numbers, was 2,100 individual cases that we handled just through the ROSES program. In information and referrals for the other support services that we provide in that center, 74,000 in one calendar year. And these are people who contact the Senior Citizen Center, or a relative of theirs contacts them, or a neighbor and says, this person needs help, or an individual will call and say, I need help, I cannot cope with this, is there anything you can do for me? It's not they're not programs that get a lot of attention. People are not Facebooking about them. They're not whining about them and complaining about them. But we have an excellent team of people in that senior center providing those services. So I'm concerned that the scope of the task force is so broad as it's defined now that you're going to be reinventing the wheel. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We maybe need to augment them, maybe need to fund them more, but we certainly don't need to reinvent the wheel because we have excellent services in place. In fact, the AGE program, which was mentioned in one of the public comments, was such a good program, and it's still in existence today. How many of you are old enough to remember George H.W. Bush's 1,000 Points of Light? Remember that? We were number 904 in 1992. Barbara Bush, because it was a campaign year, stopped by and congratulated us. We did the mugs. She didn't bring the mugs. We were number 904, just because the program at that time was recognized as just providing a service to seniors that was exceptional, and it still is. It's still serving thousands of seniors every year. So I'm really concerned about the scope of the task force as it's been presently defined, and so I'm not going to be supporting it as it currently is defined. I clearly think that we need to have some recognition that, if nothing else, the housing issue is a critical issue. But I think in terms of other issues, I agree with Commissioner Douglas that the Parks and Rec Board and seniors has been all consumed with recreation activities and projects. They had to redo their master plan. They had to participate in the Normandy Oaks Task Force issues. They have had an awful lot to do over the past couple of years. And we have not asked them to do anything with seniors. I talked to Mr. Rapinski the other day. I bumped into him in a chamber thing, and I said, how do you feel about seniors? He goes, tell us what to do. He said, what would you like us to do? He said, we're ready. So I think giving an existing group of people who are committed to working on this issue, I think we need to turn to them. I think we need to ask their expertise. If I were doing this all by myself, I would say to the Parks and Rec and Senior Board, these are the issues that we are concerned about. Housing, maybe we want to add in another couple, and just say, sit down and think about this, come forward to us with a plan and a deal and a way to move these issues forward. And give them a short timeline. Give them like 3 months and say, okay, come back to us. We want a report in 3 months and tell us where you are. In 3 months, they may come back and say, okay, you know, we're working on the housing issue, we're working on the transportation issue in coordination with the transportation task force, we're working on other services issues, we're moving. They may come back to us in 3 months and say, we want to go back to soccer fields. We really don't think we can do this. Maybe perhaps you could get somebody else to do it. That's entirely possible. That would be very fair. They may not really want to tackle this issue, all of them together. But I think given the fact that they are already in place, we need to give them the chance to work on this issue and then reevaluate in a couple of months and see where they are. If they're not going in the right direction, if they're overwhelmed, it's too big, we need to cut it up into pieces and we need to have other people involved, then that's the way to go. But to right now, at this point in time, just to say, oh, let's just talk about senior services and let's appoint 7 people and have them talk about senior services, no, too broad, much too broad. You're going to have them come back with a report in 2 years, and it's not going to be what you want. So that's my 2 cents worth. I'll take my mug home.
Commissioner Dubak?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate those comments. I think that, because I'm explaining it so quickly, this can be broken down into a series of objectives that if you build a task force specifically to address this, I don't know that as we've been doing appointments to Parks and Rec, we're appointing folks who are necessarily passionate about or have the expertise to determine housing strategies and build ordinances and incentives to get, whether it's developers to bring more senior-friendly housing, or whether it's to tap the needs of seniors to understand exactly what that housing looks like. I think having a group of people who, one, are signed on for this specific task, who bring the passion, the expertise to actually answer the questions that we're posing, I think has value, and I think is more likely to generate the kind of results we're looking for, which is objective 1, housing, this, and this. Objective 2, mobility, this, and this. These are best practices from other cities that are going to yield better results for us. Or these are the number of concerns in our, having, an open house with seniors. These are the things we heard the most. Here's how we're going to address them. That does sound like a large undertaking, which is why I don't think Parks and Rec, which has already a pretty wide scope of responsibility, is the right place to dig that deep into something that's important. As to why it's not come up through strategic planning, I think it does. It's attached to every single issue that we talk about. So that's why it doesn't become its own priority, which is why it has to be brought up at the table to be made its own priority. And we force action on it through the will of the commission, which is the same thing as the strategic planning process. It's just bringing it to the table because we know that this is something that has to be done. To Commissioner LeVasseur's point, I'm fine with going through the committee process. I was just trying to get things up and running quicker. Either way, it all comes back to this table for approval from the full body. So whether the original nomination comes from the mayor or the committee, it's still all of our appointments. So we all still have say as to who gets these appointments. So I still stand by the recommendation that we need a body dedicated to addressing these senior issues. It has been raised several times that we used to have a full-time committee that hadn't been given tasks. I think we need a task force that creates an action plan that has tangible actions this commission can take to address housing, to address communications, and also to inventory, which I know we have inventoried, but I'm every day, in public comment and, in the community, we hear somehow seniors are not getting word about the number of services that are available, not just that the city offers, but the nonprofits offer and church groups offer about snow clearing and leaf raking. So yeah, it feels broad, but that's why it needs its own body to achieve these specific objectives, so I stand by that.
And I agree completely with Commissioner DeBuck. Thank you for stating it so well and clear. I think having the appointments committee pick 5 people, having a commissioner, I guess maybe 6 people, and having a commissioner on it, or maybe 2 commissioners, as none of us are under the age of 30 anymore, right? So we're getting closer to that 2030 and having more seniors in the area. I won't hit it then, but I'm getting close. So it's something that's very important, and knocking on doors all last summer, it was something I heard at least a third of the doors. So it's important, and I agree with Commissioner DeBuck, and I'd like to set up a task force with some objectives.
Oh, geez. Commissioner Douglas.
We have no objectives. I mean, let's put the horse in front of the cart here. We as a commission should define what we want to accomplish and then assign it to a task force rather than creating a task force and then belatedly handing them objectives. I mean, let's do these things in the proper order. We have subjects, we've talked about housing, we've talked about services, we've talked about transit, but those aren't specific, measurable, attainable, time-based, and smart goals. I think we need to agree and not spend time, not spend the people's time at commission meetings doing this. I think it's an appropriate subject for our strategic planning discussion to set objectives, to figure out what we want to accomplish before we say how we're going to accomplish it.
Commissioner Macy.
So I have to say something about that, but I was going to say first that I agree with Commissioner Dubak that, I mean, Parks and Rec and Senior Services have very little to do with each other, and mushing those into one committee doesn't really make a lot of sense. And right now, there's a lot going on at Parks and Rec. There's not only the regular park planning, but there's also a subcommittee for Normandy Oaks, and there's also a subcommittee for the downtown park. So there's quite a bit going on. And so I also think that saying, okay, now also come up with the total plan for Senior Services, when there's, maybe I'm wrong in terms of the appointments, but it doesn't seem that that's been the focus of what we've been appointing people to Parks and Rec for, or why they've been volunteering for the Parks and Rec. I like the idea because I'm on Parks and Rec, so that means that I could be involved in the senior task force as well if we put it off on Parks and Rec. But I don't think that it makes a lot of sense. I thought we were done with strategic planning, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But I do also think that the SMART goals is what we want the task force to be coming up with. Like, we don't have time at this table or any other table to hash out all of our objectives for what we want seniors to do. And Commissioner Dubak has stated pretty clearly a list of objectives that we want them to start working on. But I think if we were to say, well, here we're gonna decide what the objectives are at this table, we're gonna be here for hours with all of us trying to put our input in. And that's exactly what the point of a task force is to do that work for us and come back, and then we can say, okay, we like this, but we don't like this. So I don't really have a problem with moving it to Parks and Rec, but I prefer the idea of a task force, and I think it makes sense.
Commissioner LeVasseur.
I don't feel the need at this table, at this time, to set directives for the task force. I'd rather that the public come forward, the seniors that are interested here come forward and tell us what are their priorities and what they would like to see us do. And I believe the task force is the appropriate way to do that, as opposed to us doing a top-down type of approach. I would make a motion, I won't call it a friendly motion, but a fairly friendly motion, to simply change the manner in which the appointments to the task force would be made, and that you have the one commission member appointed by the mayor with the approval of this body, this commission, that the city manager also make the appointment. I believe Commissioner DeBuck said from one of the departments, Parks and Recreations, I believe it was.
From the Parks and Rec Committee.
All right, Parks and Recreation Committee, and that the remaining 5 members come from the general public through the application process, considered and recommended by the Appointments Committee for later confirmation by this body. And so that would be my motion to simply amend the appointments process there.
Okay, so we have an amendment moved by Commissioner LeVasseur. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Dubak. Further discussion? Mr. Johnson.
Might want to change that just a little bit, because at the moment, you've still got me involved in appointing somebody from the Parks and Rec, and I don't think I should be.
We should maybe let the Parks and Rec body decide who they want to.
If Commissioner DeBuck is fine with that change, I'm fine with it as well.
All right, so to be clear, we'll have the Parks and Rec Committee appoint an individual. We'll have the mayor appoint somebody from this body, and then the other 5 would go through the standard process, but appointed or recommended by the Appointments Committee for approval at this body. Clarifications?
So right now, we're only talking about if we create a task force, how we will create it.
Yes, that is the way the logic pattern of the amendment is working right
Yep.
now. Yep. Okay, all right, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. So in the event that there's a motion made, or no, there is a motion on the table.
Motion on the table.
There is a motion on the table. In the event that this motion on the table passes, then the previous motion will be the process of how we will establish that task force. Okay. All right. Further discussion on this one. I'll just add a little bit of historical context. First, I want to give credit. I think Commissioner Perush did a great service, because I know sometimes we look for problems, but sometimes we forget the things we're doing right. And sometimes the solution is to do what we're doing right and just do more of it, right? So I commend, I mean, we have, given the resources we have, given the results, I mean, she mentioned some pretty important numbers there that we lose sight of: 2,100 contacts, 74,000 inquiries. That's pretty substantial, you know, when you consider that, you know, the overall population right now, and not every senior has needs. You know, there are seniors that are 75 years old that are financially sound. They can get up and down the stairs, and they're not, you know, calling senior center for help. So those numbers, when you put them in a context like that, are pretty remarkable. We are serving our seniors. And this is something that we envisioned in the 70s, and we set this up, and we're executing it, and we're doing it. I do think, though, since the 70s, there are some other issues that have come up that we need help with. And I think I agree, a top-down approach is sometimes uncomfortable. I think I'm not a senior. You know, we touch everything in general, and if we're simply going to tell people what the goals are, then, you know, why don't we just give those goals to staff and bypass the task force? So I think it's incumbent upon the task force to help us define what those needs, what those goals are, how we should execute things, and where that fits into any other picture in the city. They need to be implemented, because it's going to touch a lot of things. And I do think right now, where I'm willing, I hear both sides of the argument, where I'm willing to try the task force is because I think we should give them specific direction. I think for me, saying, hey, what are our problems? Let us know, come fix them. I think out of the gate, we have to say housing. That is a big issue. That is something that I don't believe we had, you know, thought about, you know, in the context of what it means today, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I mean, we always thought about it, but we never thought about it. The idea was, let's build some towers and, you know, assisted living centers, and that's where we're going to put people when they get older. That's not the way, you know, we want our community to be today. I'm not saying that that was the full direction, but that was a solution at the time, you know, universally across the country and the world. For us, though, aging in place means being able to live in your house, being able to live in your neighborhood, and, you know, what that means as far as how we execute that. I mean, I guess we could spend 100 hours each figuring that out, but if we get some help from some people that have expertise, we can hopefully come up with a good solution. Commissioner Perush?
Just real briefly, I think it's ironic that, forgive me, Commissioner Douglas, but the two seniors who are at this table are going to be the ones voting against it. And I think perhaps it's because both of us, in our own family situations, have dealt with much older seniors as members of the family and have had to cope with a multiplicity of issues that you are coping with when you're dealing with an aging parent or an aging relative. In my husband, in my case, we helped 4 through that process, and my parents are still 95, and so we're not done yet. I think we look at senior issues and the complexity of senior issues in a slightly different way. At least I'm looking at it a little bit differently. And the whole concept of opening up a whole ball of wax with a task force and a whole range of issues, to me, just it brings me back to the day when I was looking at the living situation for my aunt, who I had to take care of, and her husband. It was overwhelming, and I'm still getting that overwhelming sense when I look at the scope of the issue that you are taking on with this task force. So I'm going to be voting no, because I think it's too narrow. It's not nearly enough defined. But understanding that the senior issues are serious, we've all dealt with them personally in some way. Commissioner Douglas and I very, very recently, in a much more personal way. So we know that the issues are out there. But I would like to see this task force narrow the scope down a little bit before we okay it.
And I think I'm in a similar, mindset. I think the only difference that I'm gonna go out on a limb here is that I feel that we'll be able, at least from this body, to, provide that task force with that specific goal out of the gate, which to me, I'll be blunt and frank, is going to be what are we doing right now to make sure that people can age in place? And I think the things that Commissioner Dubuc mentioned are broad, for sure, but once we solve the one issue, what's going to be the next one that we need to look at, or what's going to be the one that we just haven't identified yet? I mean, there are things creeping around the corner all the time, innovation, technology, transportation. We don't know what's coming around the corner, and I think having that framework in place that we can say, okay, the commission sees this as an issue and a priority. Now we're charging you to fix it and get it done. But I will caution, because Commissioner Perush is absolutely right, if it's, hey, what are the issues? Figure it out. Give us a task list of 100 things to do, that, are so vanilla and broad and not well studied that, we just can't really focus on anything or get anything done. That's going to be a big issue. So I'm going out on a limb here, and I'm supporting it for all the right reasons, but I am tempering my enthusiasm a little bit because I want to make sure that, this task force remains focused, and I believe we can do that. And to the extent that it doesn't, guess what? We're going to have the same problem that we had before. You're going to have a body that can't meet, doesn't meet, we don't have quorum, and we'll have to consolidate it into another body again. So there's a reason why the committee was absorbed into the Parks and Rec Committee. I mean, quite frankly, it was, we didn't give it enough direction. It wasn't functional, and, there were quorum issues and people wanting to serve on it issues, and we could find ourselves back in that same place. So, my opinion, if we do this and the vote passes, specific tasks got to come from this body. Specific tasks. Okay. There's no other discussion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
You'll note the irony behind this vote. And I'm sure both of you are going to be voting for the splash pad, right? Commissioner Macy.
So to get on this task force now, they fill out the form on the website, and which will now have a little spot that says Seniors Aging in Place Task Force.
I'm sure Judy's here. We can can have it in the weekly news blast and get the application updated in my office tomorrow so that we have a section for this.
And those who have applications in right now that are, maybe they sent them in last week, they would need to update their application to express their interest in serving in this committee, right?
I think we've only had maybe one or two.
Okay.
We
Okay.
could
Or
just
anybody,
submit
I mean,
them
they're good
all
for 2
together.
years. The applications are good for 2 years,
Yeah.
right? So if you've submitted an application and you're interested, you might want to submit a new one and check the new box that says task force for, let me see, what do we call it? Did we even talk about that? Senior Services Aging in Place Task Force. Good. And Ms. Davids, are you happy to?
That's fine, we just went through a big process of making the application all online, so now we might have to go back to like a paper version. We'll have both available.
What you're saying is the city, like government stereotypes, is very agile.
Yes.
And quick to respond.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, see, that's what I thought we were saying. All right. That brings us to the 2 items added. The first one being related to some of the issues and clarification concerns regarding the construction fence ordinance. I want to first say thank you for putting this on the agenda to my colleagues here. I know it's something we kind of discussed during the process of the construction fence ordinance. Like many things, we don't get it perfect out of the gate, but what we were able to do in a short period of time, and the results that we're seeing, at least the positive results that we wanted, that were mentioned by Mr. Farhat, the fences are going up, they're secure, they're safe, the work sites are clean. All of these objectives have been met, and that's a good thing. So we got this thing put in place. I think Mr. Farhat brings up some good points. It's not the first time that he's brought this point to our attention, so I want to give him credit for being patient. He has sent emails very well articulated, very solution-oriented, And I think, you know, hearing what's transpired recently with him and his project, I think that I struggle as well understanding, one, if there are two completely different interpretations between those who have to follow the ordinance and those who have to enforce the ordinance, I think we need one to make that crystal clear. I think part B on this is we really have to question the merit of sort of that last sentence in the ordinance that Mr. Farhat read. You know, the intention of the fence was to secure the property. You know, these projects can take a year, they can take 6 months. You know, they're a drag on the neighborhood while they're being built. And we wanted to, our main focus on that ordinance was to limit the burden to the neighborhood. Well, there's a point, though, where once the house is secure, the windows are in, the doors are locked, you know, they're getting ready to do landscaping and things like this. It makes absolute sense that the fence should be allowed to come down and that the contractor can expeditiously finish up the rest of the project, because we don't want them working around a fence and knocking a fence over. And I mean, that just seems crazy and not within the spirit of what we're trying to do with this fence ordinance. So what I'm hoping to do is that someone will make a motion here tonight that we can go back and look at that part, make a little tweak here, one, to make sure it's absolutely clear, but maybe instead of making it clear, we make an adjustment first that is reasonable to the spirit of what we're trying to do as far as when the house is secure, whatnot, and it's in its last 20 days of construction, that we're allowed to, you know, that fence can come down, they can finish up expeditiously, and whatever we write there is crystal clear when the fence can come down. So that's my thought. I think it will be good for the community. I think, you know, it's a great evolution of this ordinance. So those are my thoughts. That's why I asked to put it on. Commissioner LeVasseur.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the first thing would be for Mr. Gillum to review the ordinance and perhaps chat with Mr. Craig and see if he's in fact applying the ordinance appropriately per the language of the ordinance. That would be the first step, and if he's not, then that's something that could be corrected. The second thing, it sounds like from the way Mr. Farhat described the ordinance that it defines how late a fence can stay up. You know, this is your deadline to get it gone. But the question is whether or not we also need to have in there an appropriate time, how long it has to stay there. And certainly, you know, the safety issues, protecting the neighborhood, that's got to be the objective here. And I guess a question from staff would be, is there some moment in time that they would recommend be added to the ordinance as far as how long that fence needs to stay in place?
I guess we'll find out. Commissioner Douglas?
So I'm reading over Mr. Gillum's shoulder here, and the ordinance says, within 10 days of the issuance of a conditional certificate of occupancy, the fencing shall be removed. Is there a difference between a conditional certificate of occupancy and a certificate of occupancy? And what's the difference?
I don't want to speak for Mr. Craig as far as his particular reply to Mr. Farhat, but I think from staff's intent when this was put together, what we were looking for, because you were trying to define construction, when construction started and when it ended. And that fence had to be up during that period of time. And so very clearly, before they're going to get a permit, they're submitting plans and the fence has got to go up. It's got to be verified it's up. The certificate of occupancy, whether it's conditioned on a few items being left or whether it's a final, is the end of construction. The gray area here is going to be as you take that wording out or modify it, then there's no clear definition of when construction ends. When the builder comes in and wants his final, generally they get issued a piece of paper that says here's your temporary or conditional, or here's your final because you're done and you're good. Then you've got 10 days to get rid of the fence. So I guess I'll talk to Mr. Craig tomorrow and Mr. Gillum, but we're going to want a very clear definition of what you feel construction is ending, because I could make an argument to you that a lot of site work is gonna have a lot of material on that site that is part of your objections when things are stored on the property and you want them secured within the property, whether it be trees that are dropped off, whether it be brick pavers, whether it be decks, material to be constructed. So generally speaking, I think, and again, I'll talk with Mr. Gillum and Mr. Craig tomorrow to see if we can clarify it. But I think staff's intent would be, we want a very clear definition of when it starts and a very clear one of when it ends. Because we get into all kinds of, well, I'm kind of done.
Yeah. And I
but
think
I'm
that's
really not done.
Yeah, I think
So-
that's a really good point, and I think we need to have that clarity. I mean, I'll just interject my personal opinion. When I see that if a builder has completed the house, essentially, and is finishing the inside or whatever, and they are gonna get a deck built, or there's pavers, how is that different than a situation if I were gonna build a new deck on the back of my house? I wouldn't have to fence in the entire house, you know, because my house is secure, doors, windows locked, just like, the vacant house that's going to be put up for sale shortly. So I think those are good questions. I think hopefully we get some recommendations as well from you. Commissioner Douglas.
I'm continuing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that makes sense to me, because even when you're doing interior, I mean, even if the house is buttoned up, you still got deliveries of appliances and paint and tile and stuff if you're doing interior work. But my other question was, is a certificate of occupancy conditional on having the landscaping completed?
Either that, or generally, depending on the time of the year, they might issue it with a bond being posted. They're not gonna make them plant trees in the middle of the winter or do something, but there is some finished grading that has to occur before they'll give them the conditional. It varies, I guess, depending on project.
Well,
and
let's
when
say
you're
it's
gonna
summer,
issue it.
just for purpose of argument here. I mean, the case was made, you can't grade a yard with fencing around it.
Well, my understanding is you've got to keep the under construction fence ordinance, you got to keep it graded so you're not running water onto somebody else's property. So part of the provisions are to keep it self-contained.
But when you're, if you're
Oh, I understand, right. I
mean-
understand your comment, but,
So I'm not just talking about land slope grading, I'm talking about what I think Mr. Farhat was talking about
Right.
was, getting trucks in to dig the flower beds and, deliver sod and so on and so forth.
right. You have the same problem bringing in rafters and dropping rafters off as you do bringing in sod.
So, but my question remains, is completion of landscaping a condition of a certificate of occupancy?
It's a requirement for the site to be done, yes.
Okay, that was my question.
Any further questions?
No.
Okay. Commissioner Macy.
Can we ask Mr. Farhat what he would recommend?
Well, yeah, I mean, at this point, we're keeping the meeting up here. But Mr. Farhat, we have opportunity to bring some suggestions back, and I think actually he has been bringing this up for a while prior to the election, and so there are some things, and I would ask Mr. Farhat to reach out to the commission if you can articulate and copy staff on it, that would be great. I don't want to preempt too many things publicly and have to unwind at this time. All right, Mr. Farhat, come on up here. That's fine.
10 seconds.
You know what? Normally, no, but you've been so patient with us over the last 6 months.
So just to clarify, it sounds like that the commission is under the same impression that I am, which is once you receive the certificate of occupancy or the conditional, or whatever you want to call it, that the temp fence has to come down within 10 days of that. That's how I'm interpreting it. So I agree that the certificate of occupancy basically is the completion of the project. I think we all can agree to that. So the way I read the ordinance is within 10 days, that must come down. The way that the building department is currently interpreting it is that until 10 days prior to receiving it, I can't remove the fence. So I'm looking at it as, here's the C of O, I have to take it down within 10 days of receiving it. The building department is interpreting as here's a C of O, I can't take my fence down until I'm within 10 days of getting it. Those are very different interpretations. I think that's what we need to clarify. So I just wanted to at least bring that to the table.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, and that could be, and again, I'll talk to Mr. Craig tomorrow, but that could be his interpretation of, you got some final site grading to do. So before you're gonna get your C of O, you've got to do that. And 10 days prior to you thinking you're gonna get it is when you can take it down. So it might be the last step as he's interpreting how that's occurring, but again, we'll clarify it, get the wording back to you, and make sure the commission's comfortable with when construction ends. I think that's gonna be the biggest concern of staff, is making it very clear from your comfort level and the community's comfort level is when construction's gonna end.
And the other thing I'd add to that is not just when construction's gonna end, but when clearly defined can the fence come down, or should come down, or must come down.
Right.
Yeah, as a bogey to that, or to something else. Yeah, because I think, you know, it's hard to put people in that position because things happen. You think you graded it, no, you didn't. Or, oh, we found this thing, your gutters aren't set up right, you know, and then you've taken it down, you've complied, but then there's issues that persist. So, I think the direction here that, I mean, we're having a discussion about it, we're not putting it into a resolution, but I think, is there any objection here with city staff listening to our concerns and coming back with a few tweaks or interpretations? I'm not hearing any objection to that.
No.
Okay, all right, good. Perfect. So, we'll continually improve. We'll get better, that's what we do. All right, that brings us to the next topic, Hale versus the City of Royal Oak. Mr. Gillum.
Mayor Fournier, City Commissioners, this is a litigation matter that's pending in the Oakland County Circuit Court. It involves a claim that there's a portion of the city's public highway that was defective and not reasonably safe for public travel. We're at the point in the case where we have to make some decisions as to how to proceed. We had an opportunity to discuss those in closed session with Insurance Counsel. This evening, I would simply ask that the Commission approve a resolution authorizing Ms. Battersby, Insurance Counsel in this matter, to proceed as discussed in closed session this evening.
A recommendation for a motion from Mr. Gillum. It's so moved by Commissioner Dubak. Is there a second? Is that Commissioner Gibbs? Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Gibbs seconded. Discussion? All right, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that leaves us to the end of the agenda this evening. Unless there's anything else for the betterment of our fine city, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Commissioner LeVasseur.
It is 10:52 p.m. It's time to go home. I move to adjourn.
We have an excellent motion by Commissioner LeVasseur. Is there an equally excellent second? Nope, we do have a second though, Commissioner Peru.
Lousy second.
All right, any discussion on this one? Okay, with none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, motion's approved. We're adjourned.